question, please.
So just to make sure we're on the same page, you know, if it was a above six-figure ad buy, did you have concern or express concern to anybody at the ability of the campaign to be able to afford that ad buy?
I did not express concern regarding the ad buy, again, because, Mr. Hicks, I didn't take care of creative, and I didn't take care of booking, and I didn't take care of the budget.
After the campaign was winding down, okay, did you and Alan Freeman have any discussions about his campaign finances or potential debts or financial obligations that he had not yet recognized?
Could you define wound down? Is there a certain date?
Well, you've made it sound, let me just make my question without the wound down. Did after the ad buy, let me make it, after March 17th, did you and Alan Freeman ever have discussions about the cost of what was going on and his ability to pay for it?
I am certain that Mr. Freeman and I had a conversation about his cost of his campaign. Mr. Hicks, I testified that I did not take care of his billing. He had asked me about a bill. I told him to quote something like call Columbus or call Miss Lippincott, whatever the case, because again, I don't do billing.
Okay, so I'm going to hand you Mr. Bry's Exhibit W. So Exhibit W from Mr. Bry. Have you ever seen this document before?
This particular document, this isn't itemized. It's just paid $290,000. I don't remember seeing anything like that. It just, no one, I mean, it doesn't have what the services are.
Okay, is the, that size of a number, the $290,000 number, were you ever involved in discussions about the campaign having that kind of obligation or that kind of expense?
With whom? That was specifically,
with anybody.
Oh, sure. So you're talking post-primary?
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about, you know, within 30 days after the primary.
Right. So I do know that Mr. Freeman and I had a conversation. I'm sorry, I can't recollect when it was. You know, it was April, May, June, I'm not sure, of 2020. He did ask me, hey, do you know anything about a bill? And I said, Alan, you need to talk to Columbus about that separately. In 2020, sometime in May of 2020, I asked Anna Lippincott about Mr. Freeman's bill. I said, hey, you know what's the deal with that? Because Mr. Hicks, it's no secret. I mean, there was a deficit.
I would object to hearsay about what Anna Lippincott said to Mr. Caraway. Plus, it's not responsive to the question.
Overrule.
You can continue.
I don't remember where I was.
So I guess I asked the question very specifically about discussions with Alan Freeman about his concern with his ability to pay his bills for this campaign. Did you ever have any discussions with Alan Freeman about his concerns with his ability to pay the bills associated with this campaign?
So I did have at least one conversation with him post-primary. He was concerned that he hadn't gotten a bill or was waiting on a bill, and I talked.
That's a different question.
Okay.
I'm asking specifically, did you have a discussion with him where he was expressing to you his concern with his ability to pay his bills?
I would object to the questioner interrupting the witness when the witness is answering. I believe the answer was responsive. Obviously, the question can disagree.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Sir, I think I answered your question in the last answer that I did have a conversation with Mr. Freeman about his bill.
I'm not asking you, that's not the question I asked. The question I asked, did you have a discussion with him about his concern with being able to pay his bills?
I'm sure at some point I did. I can't remember exactly when.
When that discussion took place, was the order of magnitude of those bills approximate to that number of $290,000?
Him and I did not discuss a number.
So you admit to a discussion about his ability to pay his bills, but you never talked about the scope or size of those bills?
I would object, and this characterizes his response. He said, I'm sure I would have at one time. That is different than admitting that he knows and remembers that he did have such a conversation.
Overruled, go ahead.
So you testified that you had at least one discussion about concerns with the bill and concerns with paying the bill, or bills. And I asked, was the order of magnitude number, that kind of number that you discussed? And then I believe your testimony was you never discussed a number. And I would just like you to clarify that, because I think a lot of people would find it odd you had a discussion about the ability of somebody to pay a bill and never talked about a number.
I would object to the non-question portion.
I asked him to clarify that.
Overruled, go ahead.
Sir, I wouldn't have known the amount, the sheet that you have here. I wouldn't have known that it was $290,744.
Did you discuss a number in that range is what I asked.
I don't know that I discussed a number with him. Again, I didn't take care of the billing. I don't know exactly what was spent where.
So your testimony is that you had a discussion about his ability to pay his bill, but you either can't remember or you did not talk about any dollar amounts in that discussion. That's your testimony.
There's no question pending. His
That's
testimony.
a question, Don.
No, you don't make a statement and say it's a question.
I believe I understand what you're asking. And I have testified that I do not remember specifically having a $290,000, 744, 290K discussion with him specifically as it relates to this document.
Did you tell other people that you had? Did you tell me that you had?
There was some concern.
That's a yes or no question.
I do not remember exactly what I talked to you about, Mr. Hicks.
Did you tell Nick Owens that that was the approximate amount?
Probably.
Okay. Did you tell, so you knew an approximate amount? How did you know the approximate amount that you told Nick Owens?
Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, based on my experience of knowing that a mail plan cost about this much, obviously there was television, there was a lot of things. I mean, it looked to me like a $250,000 campaign.
But you never discussed that number with Alan Freeman.
I'm certain at some point I had conversations with Mr. Freeman about his invoice, that his concern of, hey, you know, I need to take care of my billing, whatever the case, and in which I told him that he needed to contact Columbus, the folks at JPL and Associates or Constant Content or whomever.
I asked you if you had told me that number, and you said you didn't remember. Do you remember a discussion that you and I had on December 16th, immediately preceding the December 17th preliminary hearing in this matter?
I do remember talking to you about it was cold, it was the winter time, I did have a conversation with.
Do you remember where I was?
I think you were in sunny Florida.
Okay, so you remember that much?
Yeah,
Do you remember how long that conversation was?
I don't.
If I told you, and I'd be prepared to produce, records, that it was over 30 minutes,
Okay.
do you remember anything we discussed during that call?
No, I don't, Mr. Hicks, I'm sorry, we probably talked about campaigns, I'm not sure exactly.
If I told you that we discussed the size and scope of Alan Freeman's bill and his knowledge of it, would you have reason to believe I was not telling the truth?
I would have no reason to believe that.
Okay, so, just for the, okay, so, all right. I might be close to done. So you build Constant Content for your expenses, correct?
For reimbursements?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the receipt of a bill by Alan Freeman by Constant Content, can you help me to understand what in your mind was the difference between JPL and Associates and Constant Content?
It was my understanding, Mr. Hicks, that Constant Content was the media company or the entity that billed for creative services, whether that be mail or television, whatever the case. It was the entity that billed a campaign.
In his affidavit submitted for the preliminary hearing, Alan Freeman stated that he had a contract with JPL and Associates. He subsequently stated he had no contract with Constant Content, and whatever invoice he received wasn't valid in his mind. So help me then to understand. You said media arm, but for example, Megan Fitzmartin, was she an employee of Constant Content or employee of JPL and Associates in your mind?
Objection to what was in his mind. The question is what he knows.
Do you know whether Megan Fitzmartin was an employee of Constant Content or JPL and Associates?
I know with certainty that she was a contractor with JPL. I do not know Constant Content.
Okay. If this was one
This
of
is the commissioner.
Yeah, who's this?
Okay.
Is the front one her?
So
Some of those are
Invoices.
it's legal, Mr. Bromer's.
that's there.
Thank you.
I'm gonna look at 12 because 12. So Exhibit 12 is emails, out of the emails that you provided. We can go back and look at the emails and stipulate the emails that you provided. I went in and, retyped the URLs that were in those emails. Okay, to see if they worked or not. And they went to various things like, that's where I got the long form of Nick Owens, the attack ad on Nick Owens by Alan Freeman was from that URL. They got other pictures of photography. Were you involved in using Dropbox to share things during the course of the campaign?
Rarely. There was a.
I guess I'm going to try to speak.
Mr. Hicks, you gotta let him finish.
Okay, but I want him to answer.
You
the
gotta
question.
let him finish.
Okay.
Can you ask that question again, please?
I'm going to ask a yes or no question. Did you use Dropbox related to Alan Freeman during the course of the campaign to share materials?
I used it, but not to necessarily share.
Well, how did you use it?
That's where candidate assets would be, a logo, a photo, whatever.
Okay, so you used it to retrieve candidate assets or to see candidate assets?
Yes,
Did you use it to approve candidate assets?
I didn't.
Because you weren't involved in approving
Correct.
the assets? Did Alan Freeman use Dropbox to?
To the extent the witness knows, not speculation.
I don't believe that the candidate would have used Dropbox unless it was, for example, sometimes files are large, and so you do transfer, for example, a TV spot using the Dropbox account, Mr. Hicks, because of, the storage in an email.
So I zoomed in on, I don't know what page, if you flip it, there's a picture, it shows this picture of Alan Freeman and his family standing at the door, standing at a door.
Okay.
And to the right of that, I just zoomed in here because it's hard to read, unless you zoom in. There's that the file was from Megan Fitzmartin Constant Content.
Okay.
Okay, so did you see this? Did you see this ad? I believe this was an ad, or I believe this was a picture. Let me zoom out. Did you see this picture?
I see the photograph now, and are you asking if I've seen it during the campaign?
Yes.
I believe so. I think I was standing there while the photo was taken. I was at that particular photo shoot.
Okay. In the time since the campaign wound down, have you paid any attention to these proceedings?
Some, yes.
Okay. Did you ever have any conversations with Jeff Longstreth about the cost of Alan Freeman's campaign?
No.
Okay. Did you ever have any conversations with Anna Lippencourt about the cost of Alan Freeman's campaign?
Yes.
And can you characterize those conversations?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
What did you discuss with Anna Lippencourt relating to Alan Freeman's campaign?
Objection, hearsay.
I think he can testify what he discussed. He can't testify what she discussed.
I would have discussed with her post-primary in 2020 because I was confident that there was a deficit, Mr. Hicks. And at that point, I was told that they were going to work to raise the money into the Freeman Ford Committee, whatever it was called, to pay the bill.
And who were they?
The speakers, you know, the sitting House Speaker at the time.
Okay. And you were aware that Gene Schmidt also received a bill from Constant Contact?
At that time, I was not, but I certainly am now, yes.
And you're aware that Gene Schmidt ultimately raised money and paid her bill to Constant Contact?
That is correct.
Okay. Were you involved in any discussions with Gene Schmidt about those bills or paying them?
Not at the time. Certainly, we have had discussions since then regarding her, you know, her invoices as it relates to proceedings that are currently before this commission.
When did you quit working with the Alan Freeman campaign? When did your paid retainer end for working with the Alan Freeman campaign?
So I wasn't on a paid retainer by
Candidate, I bet you gotta say.
Yes. Most generally, I mean, after the primary, I mean, I certainly spoke with Mr. Freeman post-primary, but our interactions, you know, would have come to a near halt.
So in that post-primary would be after April 28th?
Yeah.
Okay,
The second primary, as we call it.
okay, so April, and are you aware of when Jeff Longstreth, Larry Householder, and others were indicted?
I know when they were arrested. I don't know if there was an indictment on that date or not.
But do you remember the general time frame in which they were
Well,
indicted?
what was stipulated, the arrest took place on or about July 22, 2020.
Okay. So I think it was indicted on July 30th, okay, 2020. And these discussions, since your activity with the campaign wound down almost immediately after April 28th, all the discussions that you've represented happened prior, at least in the range of at least minimum 3 months before there were any indictments.
That is accurate.
Okay.
You know, if I'm understanding your question with certainty, I believe so.
Did you have any involvement with or receive any compensation from other sources during this campaign related to the House races or trying to get certain candidates elected?
Relating to the House races, I would have.
Primary House races.
Yeah, I would have only been compensated with the exception of the reimbursements from, you know, my company from JPL.
Did you have any involvement or knowledge of growth and opportunity tax spending in behalf of support Alan Freeman?
I was certainly aware of it, particularly because of the significant press coverage.
Were you aware of the interconnections between, and were you aware of any interconnections between the people you were working with, like Megan Fitzmartin and Anna Lippincott, and the growth and opportunity tax spending?
Can you repeat that question again?
Were you aware of any connections between Megan Fitzmartin and Anna Lippincott related to the growth and opportunities tax spending?
Not directly, no.
Did you suspect there were connections?
Objection to what he suspected. What he knows or doesn't know is relevant. What he suspects or guesses or has an impression about is not.
Sustained.
Did you, from your experience as a political expert, you've been involved with a lot of things, did the activities of growth and opportunity PAC and the campaign seem to you to be coordinated?
I
In terms
object.
of when ads hit and when things
I
hit
object.
mailboxes?
I object. There is no foundation for him being a legal expert about what is or is not coordination. He is
I'm not referring to
and
legal
there is no
coordination, I'm referring to
foundation
timing.
for the premise of him giving an expert opinion.
Overruled, I think he can testify if he knows.
I certainly.
And just to be clear, now,
Mr. Hicks, you got a
well,
lot of
I'm
answer
going
the
to
question.
clarify just because you brought something up. I'm not talking about coordination in the sense of the legal term coordination. I'm talking about timing of when things were happening. But go ahead and answer the question.
Can you ask the question one more time, please?
Were you, based on your seeing campaigns, did it seem to you like the timing was coordinated between things that were happening in the growth and opportunity spending and in the campaign spending?
I would object to a question to which the response is what it seems.
Sustained.
Okay, I'll try to answer this and then we'll dance until I can ask it in a way that it can be answered. So in your personal knowledge of seeing when things were happening within the campaigns, both the Freeman campaign and the Growth and Opportunity, and given your experience with political campaigns, did the timing of things seem to be, I'm trying to figure out words where I don't get objected to. Did the timing seem to be neat and clean in terms of when things were hitting from each of those spends?
Again, I object to what seems to be.
Sustained.
Okay, I think this is a very important question. This is a quasi-judicial board. We can play games with sustaining and so on and so forth, but the board member on March 6th,
Just ask the question appropriately and then the witness can answer it, but you can't have them guess and speculate.
this is a quasi-judicial body, okay? You know what I'm trying to get at, and we're having lawyers use
Mr. Hicks, you've gotten quite a bit of latitude here today and in the first day of hearings. Ask the question appropriately. Don't beg on your knees for mercy to do what you're supposed to do correctly.
Okay. Based on what you saw in real time in the campaign, did you suspect that there was coordination taking place?
Objection to what the witness suspects.
Sustained.
I'm going to move on and leave it on the record that this very important question about coordination this is the reason why it wasn't asked. So I'm going to go to
Mr. Hicks, how much longer do you think you have? I'm only asking because we've got a court reporter who's been going now for well over 2 hours.
I think with him, I have maybe 10 more minutes.
You okay
If
with
we want
that?
to take a break or not, that's
Okay.
your,
We'll take a break when you're completed.
okay. I'm going to play Exhibit 23 again.
When you're the Goins, the short service always claims he's pro-life, but he's not endorsed by Ohio Rights Life PAC. Owens claims he's pro-Second Amendment, but failed to earn the highest rating from Buckeye Firearms Association PAC. Truth is, we can't trust Big Owens. Alan Freeman is endorsed by Ohio Rights Life PAC, and aid rated by the NRA and Buckeye Firearms Association PAC. Vote conservative. Go Alan Freeman. Growth and Opportunity PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So you testified previously that you were present at that filming. Were you aware when that was being filmed that Growth and Opportunity PAC would be using footage that was being filmed?
Not necessarily.
What do you make, define not
So
necessarily?
I was there for a candidate shoot. Obviously, campaign committee, they're there to get film, B-roll, a variety of things for a candidate's campaign. I had obviously no idea how it was going to be used. In some cases, Mr. Hicks, footage is never used. You just have it in the can, so to speak.
Okay. Let me just clean up, I was going to hit a few things on Luke Householder that we didn't, that I was going to come back to. You said was your testimony that you did not book this hotel the days in, or that you did? I think your testimony that you didn't, but clarify your testimony.
I did not book Luke Householder's hotel. I certainly remember, there was a couple of, the hotel that I'm familiar with in Claremont County is the Holiday Inn in Eastgate. And so because of my general, I was familiar with the Eastgate area, obviously. I did have a conversation with Mr.
Okay, so the answer, you've answered the question. I played the footage of some raw footage of Luke Householder, but you saw it on my Facebook page. Do you remember what you saw on my Facebook page? Was it that footage or something more than that?
Sorry, sir. I think you had some use a voiceover for an editorial.
Right. Okay, so if I said that you talked to me after that and told me that you personally told me that you didn't realize what a dump that hotel was, and that you personally were having Luke Householder move to a different hotel, you would deny that that conversation took place?
I do not remember it, Mr. Hicks. I'm not denying it. I've had literally hundreds upon hundreds of conversations about many things. It's been almost 2 years.
Did you remember, do you have any recollection of after Matt posting that video that Luke Householder moved hotels?
I do believe he did move hotels.
Okay, who would have helped him to do that, or he did that on his own?
Objection to who would have, you can answer who did if you don't.
I do not know with certainty who, took care of his next arrangement. He may have went back home. I'm not sure. After he left Claremont County.
Okay. But from what time range, when did Luke Householder quit working on Freeman's campaign?
Mr. Hicks, I'm sorry, I cannot give you a date. I was not in charge of the field program. So to give you a date would be, I would be wildly guessing.
Did anybody ever ask you for information on how much time Luke Householder or RJ Mancini were spending on which candidate for purposes of any kind or for any other purpose?
No.
Okay. Were there discussions that you had amongst the team about quote unquote C4 money and the needs to get C4 money?
Objection, the question's ambiguous unless team is defined.
Megan Fitzmartin, Jeff Longstreth, Anna Lippincott.
Can you repeat the question?
Amongst those people, were there discussions about the need to get C4 money
For whom?
for the householder operation?
So I don't know that there would be a conversation about, getting in particular C4 amount or whatever. Obviously, there was a C4 active, as I understand it, in.
But were you involved in any discussions about that team needing to get more C4 money?
I would not have been in that discussion because that's not in my wheelhouse.
So your testimony is that you were not involved in any discussions at any time about C4 money and needing to get C4 money?
Well, I am certain that I would have probably have brought up a C4 for a couple of reasons. First of all, I was not exactly familiar how a C4 worked. Second of all, I had no direct involvement with the C4, but it was very clear that they were doing work in Claremont County. I mean, you probably got a piece of mail at your house, I would guess.
I don't live in Alan Freeman's district,
Okay.
so I would have gotten Gene Schmidt pieces in my mailbox. Okay. Okay, but so for purposes of real quick here as I wrap up, I used to use the word C4. In your understanding, what did I mean by C4 money?
I don't know exactly what they're called, Mr. Hicks. It's like an independent expenditure organization, a PAC.
And what's the significance of C4?
I'm not really sure. I know that there's a C3 is a nonprofit, and a C4 is some sort of can be used for political spending. But to ask for a definition, I couldn't
So
get it.
what's your current job?
So I do campaign strategy and member relations for ORA,
Okay. And what is ORA?
the
Almost
House Republican Alliance.
And what is the House Republican
So
Alliance?
Mr.
Who are they alliance?
Mr. Hicks, you gotta let him finish.
So that is the House political arm of the Ohio House, the Republican political arm.
So who's the head of that?
The Speaker of the Ohio House is the chairman of the Republican Alliance.
So with your experience and being involved in that, your knowledge of C4s and C4 money is what you just stated? That's the extent of your knowledge about C4s?
Well, I certainly know that they exist, Mr. Hicks. I know that, obviously contributions go into them and they're oftentimes very large. The C4 organizations are all over the place. I mean, they certainly are very active in politics in America.
Okay. You're aware that Nick Owens went to the FBI?
I am, yes.
and that he went to the FBI sometime between the press conference on the 6th that he conducted with other candidates and the March 17th date, somewhere in that range, he went to the FBI.
I am aware of that.
Did you talk with him about that?
Not until after the events unfolded in July of 2020, I was made aware.
Okay, did you ever consider going to the FBI?
For what reason?
I'm just asking.
No.
No? Okay. All right, I have no further questions.
Okay, all right, we talked about having a short recess, however, I just want to know, Mr.
I
You
will
wanna
have,
take the witness,
I will
right?
have some crossings.
Okay, any estimate? I mean, I know we don't know what.
Well,
the answers are gonna
it's
be.
hard to say, I'm hoping I can get through it in a half hour, but I hope I'm not over that.
Okay.
That's legalese, right?
Okay, and, Mr. Hicks, how many more witnesses are you anticipating?
Potentially one,
Okay,
but not necessarily.
all right.
Sandy, how long do you need? 20 minutes?
Sure. 15 to-
Okay.
15. Okay, 15-minute recess. That'll bring us back at 12:50.
Sounds good.
You'd be lucky to get unless it's against the law.
I just got it. I was just,
You're fine, and I took it back, I brought it back.
Mr. Hicks. Mr. Hicks,
Yes, sir.
this came off your tape.
Oh, did it? Okay, thank you.
Thank
You knew because it didn't have whole bunches in it.
Right.
Well. Mr. Beatty, thank you, sir.
Scott eating candy? I don't think I've ever seen that before. Wow.
You can get the blood sugar levels up.
Yeah. Good old nuts chips, best chips in the world. Made in Hanover.
What's that big yellow thing out there?
You know,
What's that?
My wife and I. did.
Oh, yeah, I tell you how.
What? And they had a lot of.
We'll take a 15-minute break. I was like, I was calling for lunch, but that's okay. Yeah, they're right here. You know.
Did you, get Mike's email?
I did. I didn't respond, but I just saw it.
I mean, I think it's a good idea. We should do what we did the last couple of years for these two. And as far as getting together, I'm fine. On the last one. Now, what is that down there, Rudy?
It's called the Columbus Commons. And it used to be the city center shopping center that they tore down. And obviously then they built buildings all the way around the commons, but they have, you can't see it, but it's this end behind the Fifth Third building, there's a permanent stage. So they have concerts and events, and anytime there's a downtown event like a Columbus Marathon or whatever, so they do the staging.
No, this is Third Street, isn't it?
That's High Street.
High Street.
Third's one over.
Okay.
And if you would look straight ahead, see the tall kind of gray building? That's all, those are the core complexes. When my daughter arrived home this morning,
Oh, yeah? Where was she at?
she lives in Connecticut, she's home. We've got a wedding in Detroit this weekend and then a wedding in Cincinnati next weekend. They're letting her come and work remotely for the week.
Did she catch the bad weather up there?
She's just only been there for 3 months, so I don't
No, I
know.
mean, just this past weekend, or past couple days.
She didn't say anything about it.
Because I think they were saying Rhode Island got it.
Yeah, the coastal towns got it, but she's an hour north of like New Haven.
What it was. Potato chips.
Quality dining, huh? Good read. I think it was quite a
If you're
storm.
gonna resolve.
Yeah, that's what they say on the news.
It depends on-
94 miles an hour.
Trees down everywhere.
Where's it been?
Days.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
And David Buell in Claremont County, the prosecuting for like a day, and then December first.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, I covered Chris Smitherman at a case, and then I covered the half track for a wall case as well. And like, what was that real?
Was it multiple days? Hearings? Okay.
Yeah. Smitherman in particular.
I thought I was in executive here a little less. And then,
Yeah. I
yes,
was
I
on
hope that would be
vacation.
done. So.
Yeah, I was on vacation that time, so I was like,
What do you do?
I love
You know, so I live, you know where I live, like the east side. I
Uh-huh.
cannot believe like, you know, I'm impressed every time I'm driving here because when you come around from Eastgate to 71, it is totally unpredictable how long it's gonna take on any given day. Today was really bad. So you have to leave like an hour early to be sure you're gonna get there.
My issue, I now live south of Columbus a little bit, but when I lived a little bit north of downtown, I would hit Columbus rush hour, and I would hit Cincinnati rush hour going into the office. And then when I was coming home, Cincinnati rush hour was like 3 o'clock p.m. It was.
That's my thing, like, when I finish here, then I'll drive home, I'll get there like at 6 times. Coming back around that area.
Columbus rush hour does not start as early as Cincinnati rush hour, I don't think.
I think for all the questions that politicians get asked, the question that should be asked more is, why haven't you ever fixed this? This has been messed up. That whole area has been messed up forever.
Particularly statewide candidates who travel, like, would be committed to infrastructure
Right.
solutions.
If you were Gene Schmidt or Adam Bird, and had to go to Columbus, you have a totally unpredictable drive for just that. Once you get to 71.
I do, they're most often I see is in the restroom.
It's very frustrating. I hate having to wait.
43 and I'm on.
But today, I left at the time,
And
so
so,
I think like you would think you could get I would have been late getting here.
Frequently, when I get up the elevator to a certain.
Yeah, no, I was kind of Butler, well, for that
Restroom there,
Senate
and
race,
I
that
went
was
in and
insane.
they take the
Butler
office
and
and.
Okay.
I was there, I was.
I just don't understand.
I just went and moved the candidates all in one weekend, so.
I remember he talked to you about something recently,
The
the
last
other
time.
day.
The
Might have
last guy and I.
Marty said that I talked to me, Marty had talked to you, Marty talked to Dave. And he's trying to find a way.
Here's Jimmy 30.
I was like, away.
What do you think?
It made for interesting.
Have you ever written a single?
I have
You in on Saturday or you out?
like 6 weeks for it.
I think they quit making it.
My niece Paige's wedding.
Is that when that is? I thought that was last weekend.
No, this, the weekend after, the weekend after that, I was in Cincinnati for a while.
Are not saying.
Who's getting married in Cincinnati?
My niece, Nikki's sister's kid.
And I think they got
Mr.
liability.
I want to finish this, okay, so obviously I don't know how long I'm here today.
Right.
And I was in Columbus, obviously, already for this hearing, so I just put like 101 miles on the 10-7 because I had to come up.
Okay.
Is that
Understood.
permissible?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
And
That's
so
fine.
I don't know the case number or anything like
Yeah,
that.
I can put that in there.
Okay.
And it's been a while.
juicy.
Yeah, I know.
It's juicy.
I am going to double check. That may be more. I'm not gonna promise you. I know. I understand. I'm gonna double check. Like I'm gonna call the court and see what that is. Because that's kind of where we got that from, but it's been.
And as a public record request, that would be redacted, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Just want to make sure my social.
Right.
You know.
Because we gotta, well, actually, are you in the state system already?
I could be, I'm not a state employee now, so.
Right, yeah, and once you're in.
I have an Oaks number, so.
That's probably, that's, okay, could you, if you know that off the top of your head? Okay.
It starts with a 101.
All right,
if that
well, we may,
helps.
because that's what we gotta do. Let's say that they were, I was assessing on it. I'm an employee, I've got my, everything that's set up to pay, to be, I'm set up in the system. That's what we have to do, we set you up on the fire. And so I have no idea how long it's going to take. I understand. But anyway, just let me know. This will, we'll definitely work on it and get it in. I have no problem with No, you had said that that's what you were doing. Okay. I'm more than fine with that.
I have this congestion in my throat. It's just like a question for you about that in your hand.
I think you're gonna set him up as essentially a vendor.
Well, no, I can do it as a single pay voucher.
Yes, that's what it would be.
My question for you is,
Before you do that, I want to double check on the
okay,
because this is what it always was the last time.
yes,
I'm
10
gonna
years
call,
ago.
yeah, no, I'm gonna call the court, and if it's more, we'll reflect that.
My question is, what you need to fill out too, as opposed to just putting the dual dates on here. Because you drove down for this full date, and I didn't know whether I need to calculate that for one, and then do a separate one for this one.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've had so few of these, and that's the best answer I have. Preferably, I would like you to just do it for
One, and just pay it one.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
Which is fine.
Right.
But if we need to request two, then you feel like that different, the back way.
I didn't know you were.
Okay.
But then I feel like.
Okay.
I was like.
I had like, I was on like coming around 275 around London. It's so unpredictable that so today it was terrible. You need to go like an hour of extra time to come to Columbus. If you come that way just because you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And when I go home, it'll be the same way because I'll hit that.
It was just while I found back, and it was quick. And I never seen it.
But at least like
Two different days.
I would have to leave.
Yeehaw.
By 10 or 6. Because
Yeehaw.
of that.
So I just found out I'm out of here this Saturday. It's not a big deal.
You guys do not.
I may take the rest of the day.
All I know is it's like,
Sounds like it.
I'm just I cuss driving like, I don't know, like, what is this? Why aren't politicians at about why this has been messed up forever?
He's hoping for.
I apologize.
So I gotta be closing out a room, so.
They should be like,
Just-
adding
What?
another road. They're doing that a lot in Union Township, like connecting things.
So-
Like now the road, like you look at the front of government stuff, it goes all the way past that road out the back, out the back Buxton. So by just connecting that, it takes all that traffic that's going to those retail places.
Take them in.
You haven't gone through it. Well, we have the Union Township police. The Rick was trying to get roundabouts. So it's like, you know, why they're- Right, and then you can maintain, you don't have to worry about the height of the
That popcorn smells really good, ma'am. No, ma'am, no, ma'am, I don't thank you. No, ma'am. Yeah. The thing I don't like about this snack clears, they charge 25 cents to swipe a credit card. What's wrong with the world?
No, you're having that. No. Forget that vegetable snack.
Just gonna have some M&M's.
I said, in all the years.
Oh, good, I'm glad you got M&M.
Yeah.
Everybody ready?
Yeah, ready?
Mr. Bry, if you'd like to proceed. Thank you.
Mr. Caraway, would you say you served about 10 2020 House campaigns in Southern Ohio?
In the primary, sir?
Yes, sir.
That's fair, 8, 10, 12, somewhere in there, yes.
But with respect to Mr. Freeman and his campaign committee, you didn't deal with the finances, or did you deal with the finances?
As I testified, I had very little to do with the actual financial aspect of this campaign.
Did you handle the creative for Mr. Freeman, other than being at some of the shoots?
No, there was an event or two, like a meet and greet or whatever, that I would work, with him or his wife to, come up with a graphic or whatever, but other than that, just no.
When the video was created, the raw footage that was created after videos of Alan Freeman for commercials, do you know whether or not that video was publicly posted and available for anyone?
The video from the television shoot,
Yes, sir.
if it were public, I'm not sure what you mean by publicly available.
Do you know whether or not, do you know what happened to the video after it was, obviously it was turned into commercials?
Yeah.
Do you know what, if anything else, was done with the raw footage of the video?
No,
Have you ever heard of raw footage of video or high-quality photographs of candidates being posted on the internet?
yes, sir, I'm sorry, yes.
And do you know whether or not, if they are publicly posted on the internet, anyone is free to use that video to post a positive or negative ad about the candidate?
Either video or stills, that are online or whatever the case.
When there is money left over in a campaign of someone who loses a primary, is it common or uncommon in your experience for the candidate to donate to successful primary victors in other races?
It could be, it's really the candidate's pleasure, whatever, their cash on hand is. I mean, there are obviously certain restrictions on that money, but they certainly could donate it to other campaigns, yes.
And would it be reasonable for Mr. Freeman, for example, to want to have a final bill for any debts to the campaign before he knew how much was free and clear to be used for other purposes?
That is correct.
If I understood you, Mr. Freeman did have a conversation with you expressing his concern that he had not received the bill.
That is correct.
And your instructions to him or suggestions were to call the folks in Columbus.
That's right.
Do you know whether or not he called the folks in Columbus?
At that time, I don't know that he specifically called, when they called, whom he called, anything like that.
Now, Anna Lippincott was one of the folks that was dealing with finances for the Freeman campaign, to your knowledge?
In the sense that she would have taken care of the billing, sir.
Okay. Would it be, in your understanding of the campaign, reasonable or unreasonable for Mr. Freeman to contact Anna Lippincott to find out where the final bill was?
That's reasonable, because I advised him to do that.
I believe you testified of a conversation that you had with Anna Lippincott in which she said that their plan, whoever they was to raise the money in the Freeman campaign to pay whatever debts there were.
That's accurate.
Did you ever tell Mr. Freeman about that conversation?
I can't say with certainty, sir.
If Mr. Freeman were to say that you never did, would you have any reason to doubt him?
I would not.
Have you ever seen, other than Exhibit W, which was shown to you this morning, other than that, have you seen any documents or emails directed towards Alan Freeman asking him to pay an invoice?
Other than the document that I had, and Mr. Hicks at some point had communicated with me a document, and I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it was that, or if it was an itemized bill, or an affidavit. I don't remember, sir, I'm sorry.
And I apologize, I should be clear. I spoke with Exhibit W, which I know what that means, but you have no reason to. Do you remember when Mr. Hicks showed you one sheet with $290,000 plus dollars?
I got a few minutes ago, obviously, Mr. Hicks and I communicated about it sometime in the spring, but I don't remember if it was, I'm sorry, I don't have the document.
Would it be helpful if I presented?
Oh, yeah, okay. Now, I don't specifically remember seeing this from Mr. Hicks.
And I have an exhibit book that, without taking one from my commission, and I should have given that to you to begin with.
If you would take a look at the Exhibit marked W, let's do the tab section.
Okay.
That was shown to you this morning when Mr. Hicks was asking questions, correct?
That's correct.
Other than that, have you seen any document purporting to be an invoice that was sent to Alan Freeman or to Susan Jones?
Sir, I don't believe so.
I'm not suggesting you have to remember or know. I'm just asking what you did. Have you ever seen any invoice from JPL and Associates directed to Alan Freeman or to Susan Jones?
At some point pre-primary, I do know that there was an invoice sent, but I don't remember. First of all, I don't remember if I've seen it or if I heard of it, so I can't say with certainty. but then I was told that, hey, there was something wrong with it or whatever, but I don't remember actually laying my eyes on Mr. Ryan.
Okay, I think that what you have in front of you may be the invoice that there's been a suggestion there was something wrong with.
Okay.
Other than that you have a specific recollection of any invoice that was directed to Alan Freeman or to Sue from JPL and Associates.
I don't believe so.
Other than what you hold in your hands, do you have any specific recollection of any invoice sent to Alan Freeman or to Susan Jones from Constant Contact?
No, sir, other than what I hold in my hand.
And are you familiar, do you have any specific knowledge of any invoice sent by anybody else directed to Alan Freeman or to Susan Jones related to his case?
No.
We discussed some exhibits. Remember when I was provided copies of documents that I didn't bring with me. That include certain invoices that you had sent for reimbursement. Do you recall that?
I do.
Did you give copies of those documents to Alan Freeman or to Susan Jones?
No.
Have you ever seen are you familiar with the need of someone who has made an in-kind contribution to tell the beneficiary of that what it was, who paid it, and how much it was for?
That is correct.
Have you seen any documents giving information about an in-kind contribution that were directed to either Alan Freeman or to Susan Jones?
I have not.
Would you agree that if, as a principal, you can't report what you don't know?
I would agree as a principal.
I think it's one.
Certainly.
That's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Mr. Hicks, do you have any
Very
direct,
very quick,
based upon the questions that were asked on cross?
very quick. The 10 to 12 races that you said were, that he asked you a question about how many races. How many of those were competitive races?
It's tough to say, sir, as far as the level of competitiveness. I would say half a dozen.
Half a dozen. And would the Freeman campaign be typical of those races or super competitive, or how would you characterize it?
No, the Freeman race would have been super competitive.
Okay. When the primary ended on April 28th, you spoke of winding down. Do you have contact or any conversations now with Megan Fitzmartin, Anna Lippincott, or Anna Lippincott?
Other than,
So yes or no?
yes.
Okay. Was there ever a period of time when you had trouble getting them on the phone or contacting them?
I don't know that I needed to.
So that's a yes or no question. Was there ever a time when you
Yes.
struggled for any reason to get, you had a problem getting them on the phone?
Can't really remember.
Mr. Hicks, you have to let him finish.
Have you ever?
Let him finish. He needs to finish his
Yeah, I think
answer.
he's finished. So, okay.
He was answering his question and you did not allow him to finish.
Sir, I'm sorry, I don't remember where I was.
Sandy, can you read the question back, please?
Actually, it'll be played back.
Getting them on the phone or something.
I don't know that I needed to.
So that's the answer to the question. Was there ever a time
Yes.
you struggled for any reason? Sure.
You had a problem getting them on the phone?
Can't really remember. Do you have a specific time period? Have you ever managed,
I got it, thank you.
have you?
Were you finished, or did you have something that you wanted to say on that question?
I'm like, as far as conversations, sure, I've had conversations with them. Did I have specific, difficulty getting them on the phone? Probably. I just don't understand what context that you're asking.
I'm asking the context that you said you told him to call Columbus, and he brought that up.
Yes.
And so I'm asking at that time period, towards the end of the campaign, did you observe having any issues getting Megan Fitzmartin or Anna Lippincott or even Jeff Longstreth if you needed them to communicate with you?
No.
Okay. You just mentioned, he just asked you questions, you said you thought you saw a JPL invoice. Was that correct? I want to make sure I understood your
Sir,
testimony.
I'm confused with these invoices. I remember seeing that, but I read it, I've seen it today. I don't know if I've seen it before.
I believe he asked you a question. I don't remember I thought I remembered the answer, but I'm going to ask the question the same way I think he asked it. Did you see any JPL invoices to the Freeman campaign?
From JPL?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have seen it.
Is it possible to have her check what he answered when he asked that question? I just want to clarify that.
No, it's not possible.
Yeah, that seems to be possible in other places.
It was possible right after you just asked the question, but to have her
I'm
go
going to
back.
ask you to hand Exhibit 18. So Exhibit 18. So those are Alan Freeman's pre-primary expenses, post-primary expenses, and his annual report that was filed.
Okay.
Do you see any constant content invoices on there? On any of those?
I would indicate that the document speaks for itself, and there don't appear to be any content invoices on the face of the document. The document is more reliable than his reading of the document.
Overruled. You can answer it.
I'm sorry. I do not see, sir.
So what do you think happened with your invoice to constant content that was billed that way because that was the way that they wanted it done for proper reporting?
Object to what he thinks, he can testify to what he knows.
And I am not sure why that is not.
Okay. And then, okay, I have no further questions.
He's gonna ask some questions for you. And then after that, I'm going to offer to see if any of the commissioners have any questions for you.
That kind of clarifying questions like.
And then I'm gonna go out in the hall and see if anybody else.
You're right on the street. Do you know whether or not there is any limit on how much any kind of contributions the House caucus can make for candidates of the caucus?
Mr. Bryan, I do not believe there are limits on the House, specifically the House, and I should know with certitude that answer, but I don't believe there is a limit on what the official political arm can do for a candidate.
As you sit here today, Mr. Hicks had asked you about why the invoices he just showed you didn't appear. Your invoice to contact for reimbursement. Do you know whether or not the old HRCC had paid for those invoices?
I would not.
So as you sit here today, do you know whether or not those invoices should have been notified to the Allen Freeman campaign as an in-kind, or should have been notified to the Allen Freeman campaign as a debt, or should have been notified to them in some
I
other way?
object to the question. It's really speculative.
I'm asking what he knows.
If
he doesn't know the answer.
I'm not sure in the sense of the in-kind reporting requirements for, a can, obviously he would needed to have been given an in-kind form or the cost, and then that would have been reflected on his report.
And are you at all involved in advising candidates what to do if they don't receive the in-kind?
That hasn't happened to me specifically, but certainly that, reach out, get guidance from regulators, from the Secretary of State. Certainly they help candidates a lot with those questions.
And could you also reach out, for example, to the staff at Highland?
Absolutely, I guess so.
Thank you.
I think you've kind of answered this, but.
All right, any other commissioners have questions? That, one couple. From your memory, who was the campaign manager of the Freeman campaign?
It's a young man by the name of R.J. Mancini, and the campaign manager title should be used loosely, because it's a door knocking position.
And who was the treasurer, designated treasurer of the Freeman campaign?
I believe that's Susan Jones.
Okay. And kind of went into this in the first question, but how did you delineate your services in the campaign as opposed to formal members of the campaign staff?
I think I understand your question, Commissioner. I define my role with campaigns, obviously, every campaign's a little different. You have what I would call a high maintenance candidate versus a, plug and play. So I would have, more than anything, been a problem solver, what a traffic copy, is this not getting done? What do we need to do here? What do we need to do here? Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, as long as you gave the generalization and you're saying that by your memory on this particular campaign, the Freeman campaign, that was probably the role that you served.
Yes.
That's my question. Any other commissioner?
This is a high maintenance or a low maintenance campaign.
Well, it was a very competitive race, Commissioner, so it was, the candidate wasn't necessarily high maintenance, but it certainly did take time and attention.
One other question. You mentioned that Mr. Mancini was campaign manager, but really more or less a door knocker.
And I don't mean to be disrespectful in this role, ma'am.
But my question gets to, so who directed it? Was it you or was it Mr. Mancini?
So I did not direct the campaign, but I certainly had a role in making some of the on-the-ground, the grassroots decisions. As far as, media and those things that was handled here in Columbus.
So there wasn't a manager or director of the campaign that called the volunteers together, those who were volunteers to do door knocking, those who were doing fundraising, those who were doing media or communication, dealing with the local media. That was done by whom?
So, Commissioner, there were a lot of roles that you just went through there. So, for example, Mr. Mancini would have done grassroots and door knocking, but he would also have been responsible for, if a deployment or there were volunteers, he would have taken care of getting the data or the walk books from a gentleman in Columbus that took care of what we call a cutting of walk books. It's a little above my head, so I don't want to opine on it because I don't understand it well enough. And then, obviously communications would have been handled in Columbus, as far as a press secretary or, do press releases or whatever. Did that answer your question, ma'am?
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get to is whether it was run from Columbus or whether there was a local manager, director, whatever the campaign called them, that was running the day-to-day operations of the campaign and really directing the activities of the campaign. What I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the overall management and the direction came out of Columbus.
That is accurate.
Okay.
And then when you say out of Columbus, just so clear,
JPL and Associates, folks, that, you know, HRCC, I've heard it referred as both, but yes, here in Columbus with the team of people that have been mentioned here today.
I know your involvement in this campaign had many facets. You were involved in mailers, procuring information for his campaign. We know you were at the video shoots for his commercials. We know you're at least one fundraiser. We also know you were on almost daily phone calls with him as the primary was approaching, correct?
Sir, can you repeat the last part of your statement?
Sure, you said you were on phone calls almost with him daily as the primary approached, correct?
That's correct.
And was Mr. Freeman aware that you were being compensated for these services?
I'm sure he was. I don't know, we never discussed my compensation package.
He didn't know how you were getting paid?
I doubt it.
Did he think you were doing this out of the goodness of your heart?
He should know me better than that.
He would know you were being compensated by somebody?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
So is the Exhibit 18, is that a full listing of expenses? That is what was submitted as a complete finance report for the campaign?
Commissioner, I had the opportunity to look at that for about 30 seconds.
Okay.
I did not, could you ask your question again, ma'am?
Yes. Is Exhibit 18 that you have in your hands, is this a full listing of expenses for the Freeman campaign as you know it?
Commissioner, I cannot answer that question because well, certainly we talked about expenditures, like for instance, unless you have a specific vendor question that I may or may not know, I'm trying to see. So for example, the strategy group company on the final page, I believe it's marked page 451. There's the strategy group company, $238.55. So obviously that is some sort of a media expenditure, but clearly would not be a television buy.
Right, no, it says voter contact.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just asking if this is the complete list. This is a complete report for the financial disclosure of everything that would have been.
Commissioner, I can't answer that question because I didn't input this data and didn't receive the bills.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anybody have any further questions for this witness? Does anybody have an objection to this witness being excused?
They both raised it, or at least he stood up, and I saw Mr. Hicks raise
Is it related to questions that have come from the commission?
Yes.
So, okay, Mr. Hicks, proceed, please.
First, there's a question that Mr. Bry asked.
No, we're limiting to the questions from the commission.
Okay. So you were asked by the commission whether this was a complete and accurate, and you said you can't answer that. But you could say that your invoice that you submitted to the Freeman campaign is not reflected on this report. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct.
Okay. No, nothing further from me.
Mr. Bry?
Mr. Hicks just referred to the invoice that you submitted to the Freeman campaign. In fact, you didn't submit that invoice to Susan Jones for a compensation.
That's correct.
You submitted it to Constant, correct?
Ms. Lippincott, yes.
Ms. Lippincott. And you understand how you were field essentially for a number of campaigns.
That's fair.
And you understand that a house cut like the Kentucky City not only can spend unlimited amounts on in-kind contributions, but they don't have to list field workers working for multiple candidates as an in-kind to anyone. Is that your understanding, or don't you have that understanding?
I do not have that understanding, sir.
Would you be surprised if that were in fact the case?
I would not be surprised.
And would you be surprised if in fact your expenses were reimbursed by the HRCC?
I would not be surprised.
Would you be surprised if your expenses were not reimbursed by HRCC?
I would not be surprised.
Any additional questions from the commission? Any objection to this witness being excused?
No objection by response.
No.
Sir, you're excused, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hicks, your next witness.
There's two witnesses here from before that I wanted to recall that are like 3 or 4 minutes each. Do you want to do those out of order so they can leave? They've been waiting here all day.
It's up to you, call your case, Mr. Hicks.
Then I'd like to recall Megan Fitzmartin.
I've registered my objection. You know, she's been excused before, it's not required to be here.
Was she actually excused?
That was my review of this was an issue that was somewhat contentious between the parties. As I reviewed the video, she was thanked for her testimony, but she was never, I didn't see anything that was officially excused her. So that was my review of the material.
One correction, that there was contention, but not between the parties. I didn't weigh in on that. There was email back and forth between counsel for Megan Fitzmartin and Mr. Hicks. I would note that the subpoena, if you look at the subpoena subpoenaed her for the 7th of October. It did not state she was subpoenaed for the 2nd of October in any subsequent date, so she's not currently in the subpoena.
Ma'am, if you would. You'll need to be sworn in again, if you would, before you sit.
Please raise your right hand. Swear from the top, you will conduct the case on that. Thank you.
Thank you for appearing here again, Dave.
May I assume that my objection will be ruled?
It is overruled. That's a fine assumption.
Ms. Fitzmartin, I appreciate you coming back. I follow those two differences out there. I just have like 2 quick questions.
Okay.
Okay, you testified, I believe, on the 7th, that you were not involved in the financial side of any media placements or approvals of media placements. Is that correct? Was that testimony accurate and complete?
I testified that I'm not approved budgets.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry. I testified that I'm not approved budgets, of content from candidates.
Okay, so did you have any role in communicating to, in particular, Scott Schweitzer, the approval of financial terms for 5 volumes on Alan Freeman Everybody?
No.
You
I
did.
am not expected to I would approve, say a spot is approved to Scott. The content. I did not relate to Scott in terms of the number, Scott Schweitzer. In terms of the amount of 5.
So your testimony is that you were not involved in that. Who did that?
As I previously stated, had budgets for the candidates.
Okay. Did you have, before, there was sort of an ad blitz that took place in the last week or so of the campaign, before March 17th. Did you have discussions with Stephen Caraway or Alan Freeman about the imminent large amount of advertising that we did at the other? Did you have discussions with, I don't know how to clarify. Did you have discussions with Alan Freeman or Stephen Caraway? I could split out Alan Freeman and Stephen Caraway, relating to that there was an imminently large purchase of ads that was going to run in the last week of the campaign, about the last week.
I do not recall.
Did you know in advance that there was a large imminent purchase, a large imminent ad campaign that was going to hit the airwaves in that last week or so before the campaign?
I don't recall.
Okay. Did you have any discussions with Stephen Caraway or Alan Freeman relating to concerns about Mr. Freeman being able to pay his bills after the campaign?
I don't recall.
I have no questions for this witness.
Anybody from the commission? Thank you, but may the witness now be excused?
Yes.
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fitzpatrick.
Rob, so there's another witness like that? Is he here?
No, Rob C.R. was unavailable today, as we had mentioned in our correspondence with you and with Mr. Richter. So I am here to attend if there's any questions about that and or discussion. I can take some, if there's other dates, I can take those back to him and check to make sure if he's available. But he's not available today, he's out of town.
So I'm not going to call him right now because he's not here.
Was he subpoenaed for today?
He was the same situation where he was
It's
not
the
been
same
excused.
situation as
situation,
Mark,
sir.
where we thanked him for his testimony, but no comment was made that he was excused.
At
least that's my review,
In
but-
my view, I don't care whether he testifies or not, I care whether we get done today. And I think that, the subpoena that he was under says March 7th. It does not say March 7th, October 7th. It does not say October 7th, any other date. And he was not here, unlike Susan Jones and some others who said, yes, we will come back. Nobody asked him that. He was excused. They're not magic words. Nobody objected to him leaving.
We want to get done, he's not here.
And the expectation was that if you're gone, you're not coming back. Because we had October 7th and he left the building. He did not know then, nobody knew then if we were going to have a second date. He's not in a subpoena. And his absence here, again, I don't care if he testifies to me. Care whether we delay, and I don't want to delay.
Mr. Hicks, call your next
Okay,
witness.
Susan Jones. And I'm going to try to be very brief with Ms. Jones. I know she sat here through the whole thing, and I'm actually going to look at my long list of questions and only ask a few. Thank you, Ms. Jones, for being here and for being here on the 7th. Can you just quickly describe your experience with campaign finance reporting?
Well, I've worked in campaign finance reporting for probably about 20 years as campaign treasurer, deputy treasurer, or just simply the person who prepares reports for review.
Okay, and who are some of the, would there be, in the 2020 primary, who were some of the candidates that you were campaign treasurer for that you can recall?
I guess that's public record, who I am campaign treasurer for. I am Bill Plummer for Ohio's campaign treasurer. I was treasurer for Alan Freeman. There's someone else in my office who's also treasurer, so usually we sign on as treasurer and deputy treasurer, which is why I'm having trouble remembering, so that there's always someone on record in case one of us gets hit by the beer truck, so you can raise the money. So I can't off the top of my head at all which one's untreasured and which one's on deputy treasurer.
Okay, so if I were to ask how many total between you and, what's your colleague's name?
Matt, yes.
Matt, okay. What, between the two of you, how many candidates were you treasurer or deputy treasurer for either of those roles, would you guess? Not guess.
Approximately 20.
20 in state house races or 20 in the whole primary?
20 in the whole primary.
And other than house races in the primary, what other races were you treasurer for? Senate races, maybe just what other kind of races?
We have some Senate clients, we have some congressional clients, we have some PACs.
Okay. Were you ever in the 2020 primary that you recall treasurer for something like a lower level now, like county commissioner or something like that? Or were your races always house or senate or quote unquote bigger things? I'm not saying they're bigger things, but.
Yes, I think last year we had someone who was running for school board, and I think we had someone who, I don't know, some kind of county, something district seat. Yes, we did.
Were you treasurer or you or your colleague treasurer, to your recollection, for Frazier? Kennedy and Frazier?
Yes.
Okay, Grandel?
No.
Wickham,
Yes.
Stewart,
No.
Stevens,
Jenkins Stevens?
of course, I'm not written down. But you have Stevens, which Stevens is it?
Stevens.
Okay. Young?
That's Bob Young.
No, Tom Young.
Oh, no.
Okay. Lampton? Okay. Would you classify yourself as an expert at campaign finance reporting?
Well. I probably didn't call myself an expert, I would say I have a lot of experience.
Okay. Do you have prior experience with things like the FCC database?
FCC database, no.
Okay, so you know that there's a database that the FCC maintains of all campaign-related advertising things that have to be, media things that have to be put in an FCC database.
No.
So you're not familiar with that database?
I would object to the testimony by Mr. Hicks. If he wants to testify, he should take the stand.
I think the witness has already answered the question, and she said no.
I just wanted to clarify that the FCC, the term that you with that meant. Okay. Are you familiar with FCC required disclaimers on media purchases?
That's the text that goes at the bottom of the ad?
No, I'm talking about the forms that need to be completed.
No.
Okay. So have you not worked with campaigns before that did television advertising?
No, I have. I have worked with campaigns that have done television advertising.
Like they're not required, you're not knowledgeable about the invoicing database of the FCC or the disclosure, there are the form disclosure requirements of the FCC?
No.
Okay. When a candidate, to your knowledge, when a candidate purchases time on the airwaves, do they pay up front or are they allowed to get a bill afterwards and pay?
I don't know what they're allowed to do, but I know that generally media companies want you to pay upfront.
Okay. Are you familiar with in-kind reports? Did you know that R.J. Mancini was acting as the campaign manager for Alan Freeman?
Yeah.
Did you know that Stephen Caraway was working with Alan Freeman?
We don't remember that he was or wasn't.
So who did you deal with from the Alan Freeman campaign? That you would have associated with the Alan Freeman campaign?
Alan Freeman and Anna House and probably Megan.
So Alan Freeman, can you distinguish what you saw as the treasurer, their roles as being and their authorities as being?
Could you repeat that?
Could you distinguish each of those people, what you thought their role and authority was in terms of the campaign?
Alan Freeman, obviously the candidate, and for me, he was the person who approved any expenditures out of the committee. And I would work with Anna or Megan. Usually, I guess Anna would send an invoice to me.
Okay, did you ever receive get an invoice relating to reimbursement to Churn Creek Strategies?
No.
Okay. Did you ever receive any invoices from Content for reimbursement?
For reimbursement?
For payment?
I believe the one you've shown earlier is that from Constant Content?
I'm going to give it to you.
Okay.
Would this be exhibit W?
W, yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, this is from Constant Content, and I received this to my mailbox.
Okay, and that's, to your knowledge, that's the only invoice you received from Constant Content?
I don't recall.
Okay. Did your colleague work on finance reporting for the Alan Freeman campaign?
No.
So you did that all yourself?
Yes.
Okay. What relationship, if any, did you have with, or who would you identify any person you had a relationship with that was a Constant Content employee?
I don't know who was an employee at Constant Content, but Anna or Megan, I would have associated with Constant Content, and Jeff Longstaff.
Who would you have associated with JPL and Associates?
The same.
Same. How would you distinguish or characterize the difference between those two entities?
For my purposes, I didn't distinguish the difference at all.
Okay. So When you received that, what did you do? When you received Exhibit W in your email?
Well, the first thing I would do, and I'm sure I did, was to see that Alan was copied on the email so I would not forward it to my clients. And I believe I replied back to Anna and said, is this for real, or are you kidding me, or something like that, because I thought he was quite high.
Did you copy Alan Freeman on any of those responses to your knowledge?
I don't remember.
Okay. Did you copy anybody else? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Did you have any personal communications with Jeff Longstreth?
About this invoice?
Yes.
Not that I recall.
What did Anna respond to you?
I don't remember what her email response was to me.
I didn't ask the email.
We had a conversation about it in my office, and she said, don't worry about it.
When did that conversation take place?
One at a time when she would be dropping off probably checks for candidates. So
That's
in
not-
passing in the foyer of my office.
I can't place that on calendar, so.
Oh, no,
April, May, June, July,
I can't say.
did
I
you,
don't recall.
you don't recall just general time frame of when that conversation took place?
Well, it would have been during the primary election.
Okay,
So whether it was the first primary or the postponed primary, somewhere in there.
but you don't recall a general time frame of when you had a conversation with her where she told you not to worry about it?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna give you Exhibit 3. Which is Alan Freeman's affidavit that he filed. I believe it was signed on December 11th of 2020. And so I want to hit a couple of points here. On item 5, okay, the committee contracted with JPL and Associates to provide media services. Were you involved in that contracting with JPL and Associates?
No,
Who did that?
I don't know.
What evidence did you have of a contract?
Objection since back in 2011, she didn't sign this affidavit, Al Freeman did. I think she should ask whether she has evidence of such a contract, and then ask her what evidence she has.
Okay.
As the campaign treasurer, were you aware of any contract between Alan Freeman and JPL and Associates?
No,
Did you, as campaign treasurer, ever ask Alan Freeman about the if any contract, given your testimony that you dealt with Megan Fitzmartin and Ann Lippincott?
no,
Why did you think that Ann Lippincott and Megan Fitzmartin were dealing with you then?
because they would send me emails.
Not how, why?
Because they would send me emails if they were not involved in the campaign, I don't think they would contact me about that client.
When they contacted you, did you see them as being in constant contact? Or JPL, or just individually contacting you?
Again, I guess I didn't really distinguish between constant contact and JPL.
Did Alan Freeman ever talk to you about any contract he had with JPL and Associates?
No.
Okay. I'm going to go down on this item 11. So, well, let's look at Exhibit W just for a second. What's the date that was mailed to you?
Wednesday, April 1st, 2020.
What's the date, the due date on the bill?
March 18th, 2020.
Okay. So you testified that you had a conversation with Anna Lippincott about it, and she told you to forget it. Never mind. But you didn't place a time. On item 11, on the affidavit one, Exhibit 3, it says, on or about April 30th, my treasurer to contact JPL for review and payment. She was unsuccessful. Can you describe to me what you did on April 30th? Or thereabouts to get this invoice for his affidavit?
I don't recall this conversation with Alan when he asked me to contact JPL.
Okay, so you
I
have,
don't remember contacting JPL for an invoice.
so you have, okay, so you have no recollection of being asked by Alan Freeman to contact JPL or then trying to contact them?
I don't recall that.
Okay. At that time, so April 30th is a couple days after the primary closed, would you have had any issue with being able to contact Megan Fitzmartin or Anna Lippincott if you wanted to?
Other than there being a pandemic, probably I could have emailed them
Or phone call them? Were they, when you dealt with them, were they relatively easy to get in touch with or were they very difficult to get in touch with?
I could reach them, but depending on how busy they were, they might have got back to me, not maybe immediately, but
Within a day, within a month, within a week?
within a reasonable amount of time.
Sometimes I contact people, they don't get back to me for a long time. Number 12 on here says honor about May 5th. Alan Freeman's referring to himself. Were you aware of Alan Freeman contacting JPL?
Was I aware of Alan Freeman
Yeah.
contacting JPL? Yes.
Okay. If somebody asked you to contact JPL, you testified that you don't recall being asked, who would you have picked up the phone and called?
I probably would have called Anna Lippincott.
Okay. Did you have any conversations, or was Jeff Longstreth typically accessible to you, or not?
I could have talked, yes, he was accessible to me.
Was he hard to get in touch with if you called him, or relatively easy to get in touch with?
He was relatively easy.
Okay. Are you aware of when indictments came out? If I said that was July 30th, that's consistent, July 30th?
Sounds about right.
Okay. Did that surprise you?
Yes.
Okay, why did it surprise you?
Gosh, I just found it surprising that there would be. I just found it surprising. I'm not sure what kind of description you want there for why.
Like if my mom got indicted, I would be surprised because it's like, I can't believe my mom would have done anything to get indicted.
I guess I was surprised that people that I knew and were working with were indicted. That's unusual for me.
Okay. Did Alan Freeman, he said he didn't ask you, you don't recall him asking on April 30th to contact anybody. Did you have any conversations with him after the campaign, thereabouts, April 27th after, about his campaign finances or issues with bills?
I don't recall.
Did you have a conversation with him about the $290,000 invoice?
I don't remember specifically having a conversation with him. You know, he lost the primary, and that just sounds terrible, but really the next day we looked and see, okay, 1, and he lost his primary, so to me, that was not at the top of my priority list to move on to.
So that, the invoice, the Exhibit W invoice,
Yeah.
I just want to be sure it's clear. You do or don't recall having any conversations with Alan Freeman himself about that invoice?
I don't recall.
Why would you have not had a conversation with him about that invoice?
Objection, question calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Was he copied on that invoice? Did he contact you to ask you about the invoice?
Not that I recall.
Did that seem odd to you?
Objection as to whether, later.
Okay, so that's, what's your experience working with other candidates if they were to receive an invoice like that? Have you had other candidates receive invoices like that of that size, scope, and magnitude?
Well, yes,
Like, what's an example of another
a
candidate?
congressional candidate or a statewide candidate.
Okay, let's say in a House race, an Ohio House race primary.
No,
No? If a congressional candidate, out of the blue, from your experience, received an invoice like that, you've had that case happen where a congressional candidate has received an invoice of that magnitude?
Almost 290, almost
Yeah.
300,000, sure.
Yeah. Have you ever had a case where a congressional candidate received such an invoice and thought it was unauthorized?
Will you repeat that question?
Have you ever had a case where a candidate, like a congressional candidate, got an invoice like that, of that magnitude, and then claimed it was unauthorized?
Not that I recall.
Did you ever ask Anna Lippincott for detail on that invoice?
No.
Why not?
Well, I believe you have my email reply where I simply accounted for it's for real, and she told me don't worry about it, so for me, that moved it off my plate for the time being.
So you never went back to Anna Lippincott or Megan Fitzmartin or anybody and asked them for detail behind that $290,000 number?
No.
And Alan Freeman never asked you to go back to them and ask for detail around that $290,000?
Not that I recall.
And you don't recall ever being asked for his affidavit on April 30th or thereabouts to go find the bill from JPL?
I don't recall.
Since the end of the campaign, do you have any recollection of you personally being asked or on your own initiative trying to get invoices for the Alan Freeman campaign?
No.
Okay. On exhibit 3, his affidavit. By the way, I gave this to you, I gave this affidavit to you. Have you seen this before today?
I believe I saw it in Don's, I believe Don shared this document with me.
Did you see this in the time frame or prior to December of 2020?
I don't think so.
Did Alan Freeman ask you any questions before submitting the affidavit to make sure that the affidavit was accurate?
I don't recall.
Okay. Were you, item 18 on the affidavit, on the second page, talks about on July 30th, 2020. So that's the date, also the same date as the indictments. Sought invoice from Don Bray on how to proceed. Were you involved in any conversations on or about that time about how to proceed with?
Objection to the extent that he's asking the witness for conversation she had with counsel. I represent the campaign, and Chief Treasurer of the campaign would have been speaking as an.
I'm not asking for about conversations with you.
Okay.
I'm asking for conversations with anybody on or about July 30th related to JPL and invoices.
Not that I recall.
Okay, so you were not consulted with or asked any questions at that point in time?
Not that I remember.
Okay, so after April 30th, I don't need to beat dead horse, but between April 30th and July 30th, do you recall any conversations or anybody coming to you relating to the Alan Freeman campaign asking about these, about invoices or needing to deal with debt or anything like that? I think I might be close to done. I just want to look at my notes list here. So I'm going to give you exhibit 19. I think I'm done with this. I'll try and be fast. So I apologize for you having to sit here for so long. Exhibit 19. 15 pages for anything comes up on those that you were right there. So exhibit 19 is a filing that Alan Freeman's campaign made to the Secretary of State's office on or about April 15th, 2021. Do you have any familiarity with this filing?
Yes.
Okay, why are you familiar, or what are you familiar with about it?
Well, as campaign treasurer, I'm the one who uploaded this to the Secretary of State's website.
Were you involved in writing it?
I did not write this document, but I have read this document, reviewed it, and
Who do you believe, who wrote the document?
Objection to the extent that it calls for attorney-client communication.
So, Mr. Broad, you previously testified in one of these hearings that you were not involved with this document.
No, I didn't. I never testified. I
You
never
said-
stated, I never stated that I was uninvolved in the document. You said that, I never said it.
I got the video, so. This document, I'm not anything attorney-client privilege. Did you have any discussions with anybody about this document? Other than an attorney, other than Don Broad?
I don't recall if Alan and I talked about it or
Your colleague, I forget the name, the other,
not.
Matt, did you have conversations with him about it?
No.
Did this document seem normal to you, or
Objection to what it seems.
have you ever had another campaign have a document like this that you were asked to file on its behalf?
No.
Okay. Is the lead up to filing this document, which the Secretary of State's office says was on April 15th, 2021, so a year later, did anybody in 2021 ask you any questions about researching into invoices or anything like that?
Not that I recall.
Not that you recall. Okay, are you familiar with, if you flip back to that document, there's a set of invoices that were also filed with the Secretary of State's office. Did you, when you were asked to file this report, did you review these invoices?
I would have looked at these invoices.
Just so I'm really clear, you filed both the letter and the invoices?
You know, I guess I remember we put something up, I believe. Because we wanted to have more information out there, because I think you were interested in more information, so. But it was April 15th, if you work in an accounting firm, so if these documents were a part of the filing, I'm sure I looked at them, but it's,
Did you look at them, have you looked at them subsequent to April 15th, 2021? Did you do anything when you saw these documents to investigate or call anybody on these documents to confirm whether they were authentic or not?
No.
Why not?
why would I?
Well, let me ask you a question, then. Do you believe that accuracy in campaign finance reporting is important?
Yes.
So I think you just answered the question you asked me.
Objection, what the president thinks is irrelevant, you should ask a question.
You need to ask a question, Mr. Hicks.
So you just said you think campaign finance reporting integrity is important. But when you saw these invoices, you didn't feel the need to contact anybody about their authenticity?
Yeah.
Do you know Scott Schweikert?
I know him, I heard him speak at the last hearing.
Did you watch the last hearing on video?
No.
Okay.
She was sitting.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So but before that, you didn't know him? Or did you have any interactions with him prior?
I've seen his name on emails back and forth before, but I've never met him in person before.
Okay. So I believe that the total expenses across Alan Freeman's entire campaign were reported by you as the treasurer as being $14,000 and change.
Objection, that's not a question, that's an assertion.
Were the total financial expenses reported by you for the Alan Freeman campaign around $14,000.
That's what the campaign report says, the month what came out of his bank account.
Okay. How much did you keep track of his on-hand amount of cash for his campaign?
How much did I?
Like, yes, daily, weekly? Did you keep track of, he has so much money in the bank, how much can he spend?
Well, we have every time we do a bank deposit, we know how much he has in his account. Every time we spend money, we know how much is in his account. Whenever he asks me for a balance, if he did, I would give him that number, but.
I'm not familiar with finance filings on the online system, but I'm aware of the paper forms, and I assume they're similar. When you file a report each time, does it include a statement of how much is on hand?
Sure.
Okay, so even when you do the online system. So if I told you that at the end of his campaign, your reporting showed about 14,000 expenses and 96,000 still on hand, would you have any reason to dispute that?
I don't have any reason to dispute.
Okay. Did it strike you as odd that so much money would be left unspent in a very competitive race?
Objection as to what it was striking.
No, she's been involved in a lot of finance reporting.
You could answer.
It's unusual.
Would it be safe to say that, I know you have much more experience than me, but generally speaking, when it gets down to the end of a competitive race, your bigger risk is candidates start putting stuff on their personal credit cards versus that they leave a bunch of money sitting in the bank?
I would object to from the question. There's been no suggestion that anybody put anything on personal credit cards. I think it's wrong. You can object to it.
So say, just reword the question, Mr. Hicks.
So in your experience in competitive races towards the end of the race, is the bigger issue with candidates that they run out of money or that they leave close to $100,000 unspent?
I guess I would surmise that candidates might be likely to run out of money in a competitive race.
Okay. Let me just look at my next real quick, and I don't think, unless I see something pop out at me, I don't think I have any further questions. Oh, did you have any candidates that you worked with that did have invoices from Constant Content that were paid?
Yes.
Do you remember which candidate?
Not specifically, no, I don't.
It was a House race. Do you remember even what the House or Senate race?
House.
Okay. Do you remember anything about the size, scope, or manner of that? Whatever invoice you're referring to. A big, little,
Not as big as,
but a six-figure invoice?
I don't recall that.
Okay, but you think of more than one case of candidates getting billed from Constant Content that were paid?
Yes.
Or just one, more than one case? So is Alan Freeman a unique case of a candidate of which you were treasurer that received a bill from Constant Content that was not paid?
Repeat that question, Tony?
Do you recall any, I'm going to phrase it a little differently to make it easier. Do you recall any other candidate that received a bill from Constant Content that did not pay the invoice?
Yes.
Who?
I can't say specifically.
Okay. More than one candidate, one candidate?
I think I had a few members.
And do you characterize on those, any discussions you had with that Dana Lippincott about those invoices?
No.
Do you recall having discussions with Dana Lippincott about those other invoices?
No.
Were they large magnitude invoices or smaller invoices?
Small.
Small invoices, okay. I don't think I have any other questions.
So here's a copy of our exhibit notebook, so I said,
Oh, you want to give me that one back?
Maybe a little easier that way. Have you ever had training sessions in campaign finance through the Secretary of State or the federal legislature?
Yes.
And about how many would there be? A lot, of few?
A dozen.
And do you also, in the course of what you do as treasurer of various campaigns and entities, connect with the Secretary of State's office on a regular basis?
Absolutely.
And have you ever been the subject of an adverse finding, an adverse election law finding by the Ohio Elections Commission? Have you ever been subject to an adverse finding by the Ohio Ethics Commission? Are you aware that the Ohio Revised Code imposes upon treasurers a duty to keep books and records? And do you do that? Did you do that for the Alan Freeman campaign? Is it your understanding that all expenditures have to be made through the treasurer of the campaign, or do you have a different understanding?
Yes, that's correct.
And is the process that you followed in the Alan Freeman campaign when you got an invoice from whomever, did you immediately pay that, or did you, before paying it, what did you do to make sure it should be paid?
In Alan's case, he was the approver for his campaign committee, so any invoice I received, whether by email or mail, I would forward to him for his approval to pay, unless he was copied on the email, and then I would say he already saw it, and he would send it to me then with approval to pay.
When he was copied on invoices, did you ever follow up to say, have you gotten this paid?
I can't recall if I did with Alan. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't, depending on, you know, the week of the campaign, the week of the campaign.
You noted that Exhibit W, I believe that was, what, April 1, 2020, is that the date it was sent?
I believe so.
April Fool's Day. And you noted, I believe, that Mr. Freeman's email address was on that email.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know whether, in fact, that actually went to his email, or instead of being thrown in the spam or something?
I have no idea.
As treasurer, did you allow receipts from the campaign, or to the campaign, to be deposited by anyone other than you?
No.
Did you allow expenses of the campaign to be paid by anyone other than you?
No.
Did you allow anyone other than Alan Freeman to approve or disapprove expenses that were still claimed to be expenses?
No, that was our agreement that he would do the approval.
Are you familiar with how to report in-kind contributions? What information do you have to have before you can report an in-kind contribution?
I need to know who made the in-kind, their address, their employer, the date of the in-kind, and the purpose, and the amount.
Can you pay bills if you don't receive?
No.
Can you report a debt if you don't know what the debt is or who it's from?
No.
Are you aware that the Ohio Revised Code also imposes a duty to file accurate campaign finance reports?
Yes.
And did you do that?
Yes.
If you would take a look at Exhibit A in the notebook in front of you, and that is the first complaint by Mr. Hicks, to which are attached invoices regarding 6 broadcast advertisements that appear to be sent from the strategy group to Constant. Do you see those, Susan? Were those sent to you as treasurer of the campaign?
No.
Is there anything in Exhibit A that suggests that they were sent to Alan Freeman as the candidate?
Not that I see.
And there's also been some reference in Exhibit B to activities by Luke Household. Did anyone ever send you or provide to you as treasurer of the campaign any invoice for the activities of Luke Household?
No.
Did anyone ever notify you that all or part of the 6 broadcast advertisements that are attached or referred to in Exhibit A were an in-kind contribution from them?
No.
Did anyone ever notify you that somebody, whoever it was, paid for Luke Householder's activity, and that should be reported as an in-kind contribution from a certain amount?
No,
Did anyone ever send or provide to you as treasurer of the Allen Freedom Campaign an invoice or an in-kind notification regarding anything else that wasn't properly reported by? Is it proper to report the $290,000 and change invoice once Anna Lippincott told you to forget about it?
I don't think so, no.
And when she told you to forget about it, what did you do?
Forgot about it.
Is it lawful to just guess the amount, guess whether or not there was a contribution or expenditure of that?
No, I don't think
Is it lawful to guess the amount of the contribution or expenditure of that in your campaign finance?
so. No.
Do you know whether or not you can report something if you don't know who made it?
No.
Is it proper to just guess what the purpose of, for example, the $290,000 invoice was?
No.
Do you know who ultimately paid for Luke Householder's activities, if anyone?
I don't.
Do you know whether or not the House Republican HRCC, as it existed at the time, can have field workers without there being an in-kind of any particular candidate?
I do know
And is that in fact the case?
that. That isn't that.
And can that be done without the name of the field worker being included on any report?
Yes.
And I would ask you to take a look, just briefly, at exhibits R, S, and T in the notebook in front of you. And are those examples of what are the examples of?
In time. In time report.
And would you also take a look at exhibits L, M, N, O, P, and Q? And tell me whether or not they're examples of what an in-kind notice to a candidate looks like.
The spreadsheet does the invoices and the included. I'm not able to see those. And from ORPA, we just get a spreadsheet of incomes.
Mr. Hicks asked you whether it was unusual to have, close to $100,000 in a campaign account in a campaign. Is it also, in your experience, unusual for candidates not to receive timely invoices so that they would know what the debts were before the end of the campaign?
I think that can often happen, and I think especially in 2020, when there was a pandemic, a moved election, there was a lot of uncertainty, and people were not on the regular routine, so I think in 2020 it was especially a challenging year. That's a long answer to your questions. I think my answer is yes.
you would take a look at exhibit, actually, I think we were doing exhibit 19. Exhibit I is the same filing, April 15, 2021 filing. We have the Secretary of State's office. This was like- Do you see the invoices that are part of that?
Yes.
Have you ever seen those invoices before 2 days earlier, in April 2021?
No.
Do you see the one-page explanation in Exhibit 5? It is sort of in the middle of business. Do you have that?
Yes.
Do you want to go ahead and read that?
The committee to let down agreement. We are unable to specify what, if any, amount would be owed by the campaign committee regarding certain advertisement broadcasts in 2020 without knowingly misrepresenting any such amount listed.
Can I object, because I just saw something in another matter where having a witness take an exhibit and just read it into the record is not proper. So if she needs to recall, if it needs to impeach her because she doesn't remember something correctly by using the exhibit, then she should, but just merely having the witness read an exhibit into the record is not proper.
But let me ask you paragraph by paragraph. You read the first paragraph, right? Is that true to your knowledge?
Yes.
Would you read the second paragraph?
We sought unsuccessfully to obtain information from JPL Associates on what, if anything, they claimed we owed JPL. JPL never told us, and JPL never invoiced us for anything. We were advised by the Executive Director of the Ohio Elections Commission through counsel that we had no duty to report debt under these circumstances, and we followed that advice.
Is that true to your knowledge?
That is true.
Would you read the third paragraph?
On Friday, April 9th, 2021, for the first time, council received the attached invoices from Strategic Media Placement into Constant Content totaling $137,982.81 for advertisements for Freeman Allen. We had not previously seen these invoices, nor have we received anything from JPL Associates or anyone else claiming that we have all parts or none of these invoices.
Is that true to your knowledge?
Yes.
And would you read the next paragraph?
We had no contractual relationship or agreement with Constant Content, while the campaign committee once received a highly questionable email from Constant Content asking us to pay them over $290,000 without any description of why or what for. We were later informed that the email was not a campaign committee table and that we should disregard it, which we did.
Is that true to you?
Yes.
And is the invoice to which they refer the exhibit W?
Yes.
Would you read the next paragraph?
We have received no information from anyone notifying my campaign committee that the strategic media invoices had or had not been paid by a third party, or that an in-kind contribution had or had not been made by to my campaign committee.
Is that true to your knowledge?
Yes.
Would you read the next paragraph?
We do not know who, if anyone, paid Constant Content, a for-profit corporation formed by Jeff Longstreth, or where Constant Content got funds to pay these invoices to strategic media.
Is that true to your knowledge?
Yes.
Would you please read the next paragraph?
We do not know whether or not all of the $137,982.81 was for advertisements for my campaign committee rather than for the independent expenditure ad that were running at the same time. Sure.
Is that true to your knowledge?
Yes.
And the next paragraph? I believe it's fine.
We understood that JPL and Associates would be assisting with my campaign and reviewed one of the ads before it aired, but we did not authorize JPL and Associates to spend over $137,000 on behalf of the campaign committee without the campaign committee's prior approval, and we did not authorize Constant Content to do anything. Had JPL and Associates sent us a bill for over $137,000 that we had never authorized, we would have to dispute owning that amount of money.
Is that true to your knowledge?
Yes.
And have we concluded?
Two more.
Next one.
In short, we are more than willing to report our guests and kind contributions as accurately as we can, but we are unable to properly report and properly characterize what, if anything, we owe for the broadcast ads that run in the name ran in the name of the campaign committee, either as to its amount, all or some or none of the 137,982.81, its source, content, JPL and Associates, or third party, or its character, debt, disputed debt, in-kind contribution, or uncoordinated expenditure.
Is that true, you know?
Yes. One more. Thus, as recommended by the Office of our Counsel on Friday, April 9th, 2021, we are listing a zero debt to JPL and Associates, filing the attached invoices and providing this explanation.
Is that true, you know? You were aware when you filed this that it was a public document?
Yeah.
Would you take a look at Exhibit W? When you received this email asking that the Alan Freeman campaign pay over $290,000 to content, what was your reaction?
I was surprised.
Were you shocked?
Yes.
Have you ever been presented with that big of an invoice for representatives?
No.
Did it stand out or not really stand out?
It absolutely stood out.
Did you provide to JPL and Associates in real time how much money was in the Alan Freeman campaign account?
I did.
And Alan Freeman authorized you to do that, correct?
Yes.
So, in your experience, have you ever had a situation where any candidate would give a blank check to anyone and spend over $200,000 more than the candidate had a campaign account?
Not in my experience, no.
Are you aware whether or not unauthorized expenditures are debts or legal obligations?
I'm not aware.
Do you know, are they legal obligations if there are none?
No.
Are you aware of any invoices that were properly submitted to you as treasurer for the Alan Freeman campaign that were not reported, other than the one that you were told to do?
No.
Are you aware of any unreported in-kind notices to the Alan Freeman campaign?
No.
Would it be accurate or inaccurate to say you can't report what you don't know?
That is accurate.
Nothing for this.
Mr. Hicks, do you have any follow-up?
I have quick ones, if it's okay, I'd like to sit here because I'm going to point to the different document.
That's fine, Mr.
Okay.
Hicks.
So you just read from Exhibit 19, and the second paragraph where it said we sought unsuccessfully to obtain information from JPL and Associates. When I questioned you, you said you didn't make any effort, you weren't aware of any efforts to get information. It's this one. It's the, I don't know where it is in his, but, okay.
It's the same thing.
So how could you,
Yeah.
you just answered to Mr. Bry that that was true. How did you know it was true?
Well, I was using the collective we, and Alan's affidavit you had me look at earlier said that he did that.
But it also said that he had contacted you on April 30th, and your testimony was that you don't recall him ever doing anything. Is that correct?
Right, I don't recall, I didn't say he didn't do it.
So the same things where you said you were answering as a collective we, is there anything in this letter that you personally, because of actions you took or investigations that you did, would say that you know they're true because of that, because of your work? Or were they all collective we?
You want to go paragraph by paragraph? I don't want to.
Well, why don't you just point out any paragraph where by your own personal knowledge or your investigation, you know that that paragraph is true?
By my personal knowledge.
I would ask that he goes paragraph by paragraph as a specific thing, as I did.
I'm confused the way I do it. I would like her to point out any paragraph where you feel that you have personal knowledge that that paragraph is true.
Why don't we do this? If that's how you're going to approach it, why don't we take a break, give the witness the opportunity to review the document, and then she can make those adjustments. Why don't we take 5 or 10 minutes?
What time is your trip to Michigan?
It's tomorrow morning.
Okay, so okay. What time are we trying to be done today?
When we're finished.
3:30.
Okay.
Today.
I thought you had to leave now, like you were leaving.
So AJ going with you or just you and Nick?
AJ and Andy are both going.
Oh, Andrew, well, she flying straight there, or she coming here first?
She flew in this morning.
Oh, nice.
She's actually going to be going.
What the heck?
Steve is getting married tomorrow, and my niece Monica is getting married the following Friday down in Cincinnati. So Andy got to go ahead to come home and she'll work remotely.
Oh, for the week, oh, great, you have a good.
Yep.
From where? Where is she?
Ma'am? Is that she? That's on the Bristol, Connecticut.
I don't know. She's the one who.
Go ahead.
No, the one Don.
So they're going, AJ and Andy are going at 7 o'clock, because they're coming back Saturday morning to the last Saturday night. It's good to be my kids.
Yeah, it is. Well, that means they'll probably be hanging out with Wes at some point, because I think Wes and Haley have our tickets.
My brother has tickets, and I'm not sure. I'm sure his year, his children will show up. Is that what you're getting?
Well, my son.
I will take it.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure.
Our yearly will, what is the needs for them, and otherwise say, oh, they just, like early on in the season,
Yeah.
you know, we said to the boys.
Yeah.
Is that early on,
Well, I didn't used to be that way.
early on in the season, when the season started, Wes was like, I want Penn State. I don't know what time it's gonna be. but I
My
want Penn
husband's a
State.
Nittany Lion.
Oh, is it really? Oh.
Yes.
Long day.
He's from Pennsylvania, and that's his alma mater.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, he's prepared for a loss.
They're not looking at the last hour.
No, they did not. Last two.
Yeah, who was it? Penn State?
Well,
Sweet.
they're on their second string quarterback right now.
Right, because Clifford got hurt.
Yeah.
And they played Penn State.
Yeah, it was
Or not
not
Penn State,
good, and
they played
they
Iowa.
just, they lost to, was that Iowa their first loss?
I think so, yeah, they went into
Oh, Penn State's
Iowa.
lost twice.
Right,
Yeah,
they went into Iowa
They
and
played
lost.
last week.
Illinois on Friday, last
Okay.
Friday night. they-
So,
The
yeah,
overtime game.
it was in Iowa, that's when I think their quarterback got hurt.
Yeah.
Because they were in there for a while, and then it just fell apart.
Yeah.
As soon as he was gone, it was not a successful.
They said it was at about 60% last week, but this is a
Yeah,
good done.
no, it was not good.
Yeah.
That's not good. So, yeah. But I'm not, well, I don't know, they were saying now that it won't rain, it may not be raining.
I was gonna say, I heard it's supposed to rain, I guess, all day tomorrow.
They said that.
Went Saturday morning, and then rest assured.
Well, I'm now starting to see the new trend, which is getting married on a Friday as opposed to the weekend, because it's so much cheaper.
Oh,
I
really?
know.
Oh, okay.
That's crazy.
I've been to several now in the past year.
I have too.
What's on
I
the
have
paper?
too.
Getting married on a Friday as
Get
opposed to the
married on
weekend.
Fridays.
My wife and I got married on Friday.
I got married on
Got married on Saturday.
I got married
on a.
I got married on a Sunday in Catholic church.
I did too.
I think I talked about that.
Yikes.
It wasn't purpose, it was Memorial Day weekend.
Oh, well, that's okay.
And my wife and I graduated one weekend. My parents, a lot of my family lives in California, so we graduated one weekend and got married the following weekend.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we don't have to travel twice.
Yeah, no, that's nice.
Always thinking about your mommy and daddy.
I'll put it back.
I look back at it now, like, why were we in such a hurry?
Hey, you got a degree and a wife. I mean, I mean, that's the crazy.
Check the boxes off, come on.
I was 24 at that stage, I'm like,
I tell you right quickly, my wife and I got married on a Friday the 13th.
Nancy was his red tie.
I was in charge of finding the reception hall in the church on the same day. And that was my one task, like figure this out. I was all excited because I got it all lined out. Reception place, church, And then I call her at her work, like, I got it figured out, we can do it on this date. And she's like, isn't that the 13th of the month? We got married on Friday, July 13th.
Oh, wow. That's great.
So she ended up making she's an artist, and she ended up making the invitation for the reception and all sort of superstition stuff around it, like black cats, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Made it easy to set a theme.
Oh, yeah, it worked out okay though. So far, so good, after 31 years, I think.
Wow.
So.
Ms. Jones, have you finished your review?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Why don't we proceed then?
So my question was, of the paragraphs in this document
Yes.
that you testified down the line were true to Mr. Fry, which of those are true based on your own personal knowledge?
Of the first paragraph is true based on my own personal knowledge. The sentence that begins, we had not previously seen these invoices, and the rest of that paragraph, that is in the third paragraph. I know that from my personal knowledge.
So let me do it different because I'm having trouble following you. So the first paragraph you said is true based on your personal knowledge.
Correct.
The second paragraph true based on your personal knowledge.
Not my personal knowledge,
The third paragraph.
only the second half of it.
Am I correct? I don't apologize for interrupting, but did you say the personal knowledge that number 2 is correct? Paragraph number 2?
No.
No, she said no.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard, but I want to make sure.
So personal knowledge on the third paragraph, just call out the part, maybe read out the part that you know based on your own personal knowledge.
Beginning with the sentence, we had not previously seen these invoices, and through the rest of that paragraph.
But the part before that, you don't know based on your own personal knowledge.
No, because it's your first counsel.
Okay, okay. The next paragraph.
True to my personal knowledge.
Now, is it true that it was highly questionable?
The invoice? Yes, I would say that's a big characterization.
So do you have exhibit W?
I'm familiar with Exhibit W.
Okay. Was this the format, you said you had other candidates that received invoices from Constant Contact that paid, I'm gonna few that didn't. Was it the same format that they received invoices from Constant Contact?
Usually, they come in that format, but if you click on the view invoice, you can see an invoice. Or sometimes it goes to the candidate also, and they would send you the invoice.
Did you ever click on view invoice in this?
No.
Why not?
Because it was $290,000, and I found it to be unbelievable and unlikely to be correct.
But if you didn't click on it just to be clear, the other invoices from Constant Contact that you received for other candidates were in the same format, meaning they came from QuickBooks or whatever this was.
Right.
Okay. And on the other candidates, you would click on the pay invoice, I guess, or something, and it would show you the invoice more detail.
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't.
Oh, so if you click on that view invoice, it will show you more detail. Whether I did that with every single one, the
Okay.
answer to that can be 100%.
What would determine whether you clicked on the view invoice or not?
If there was a PDF attached, I would just open the PDF and print that.
Okay, why didn't you do that with this one?
Because I found the invoice to be unlikely to be correct, unbelievable, shocking, and I was not going to spend my time on it. I just replied back to her, whatever I said, are you kidding me, that's not real, or whatever I said. And
So your testimony is that in reaction to an invoice you found to be shocking and unbelievable, your course of action was to not click to see the detail behind it?
yes,
Okay, let's keep going with, so on the questionable part, the format of this is the same format as the other candidates were receiving invoices from Constant Contact.
that is how it came out.
So the questionable part to you was not the format or being familiar with these invoices, but the amount.
Yes,
And you did not take any action to investigate what made up the amount.
correct.
Okay. All right, so let's keep going. We were on paragraph the third one, which they started with, let's go to the fourth one, but we had no contractual.
No, I just answered that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my bad. The next one, we have received.
That is true to my knowledge.
Your personal knowledge?
Personal knowledge.
How would you, okay, you're saying it's because you didn't have any knowledge that he's being paid. Did you ask Megan Fitzmartin or Anna Lippincott whether any or all components of the $290,000 invoice that you were told to ignore should be recorded as in-kind contributions?
No, I did not.
Why not?
Well, I don't know that there are any components. I don't know what makes up that invoice.
Why don't you know what makes up the
The
invoice?
Are behind the strategic media are for the
Hold on.
137 JCL invoice.
Why don't you know what makes up that invoice?
Why, I just explained I did not open the invoice to see if there was any detail on it, and the invoice comes from constant content.
But you were familiar with getting other invoices from Constant Contact.
Sure.
Do you think that that showed reasonable diligence?
I think it showed, it warranted what it deserved at the time.
So you thought that that was reasonable diligence, that that would be the diligent way for a campaign treasurer to respond to such an invoice, to not look at the detail?
Again, I think I had expressed that that was such an unusual bill that, no, I did not go further. Certainly if they'd come back around, I'm sure they'd come maybe in a different way or with more explanation.
Let's move on to the next paragraph, which I think, unless I skipped one, I thought, is that we do not know who, if anyone, was that paragraph one?
Yes, I know that from my personal knowledge.
The next paragraph.
I know that from my personal knowledge.
What steps did you take to develop that personal knowledge? It says whether or not all of the 137.
Well, I was not presented with any information telling it was an independent expenditure. I'd have to be notified as the treasurer by another committee, like a PAC. They made that independent expenditure.
So what it says, I'm going to read it. It says, we do not know whether or not all of the 137,982 was for advertising for my campaign. That wording would imply that some might have been. So you said you know that's true based on personal knowledge, when you also had, you were filing at the time you filed that, invoices. So that were for $137,000 in media.
I
So
would
can you
object.
clarify,
This is
can
argument.
you clarify whether that paragraph is something you have based on personal knowledge?
I think she can answer it.
I guess my personal knowledge would be just looking at these invoices.
So you did look at these invoices before you filed this?
By this, you're referring to exhibit 19?
Yes.
I guess I'm not sure what you're asking.
So you stated that you filed this with Secretary of State.
Yes.
This has a set of invoices for media services.
Uh-huh.
And you just said, I looked at these invoices when I filed this. So how can your comment about that the 137 is true, that paragraph is accurate when at the same time you're filing invoices that would seem to indicate it's not accurate?
Well, the paragraph says whether they were for the campaign or for independent expenditure ads.
Did you do anything to investigate that?
No.
Okay, so I'm just gonna move on to the next one. The we understood, I think, is the next paragraph.
I'm not,
Not for the,
not to my
by your personal
personal
knowledge.
knowledge.
Okay, I think I can stop there on this. We're in, it's in this packet, it's in actually 2 exhibits. But if you flip back through the exhibit 19, I can give you mine. Let's see if this has all the pages. It has the invoice. So yeah, so go.
Just so we're clear, she's looking at exhibit I in front of us, correct?
I think she's, mine is exhibit 19. Let me give you.
I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm looking over her shoulder to see it's the same thing.
I believe the same piece of paper there.
I just want to see it. So if you flip back through that exhibit, there should be a page. I'm going to give you the total at the bottom of the page.
Just what exhibit are you looking at, right?
We're either looking at my number 19 or his I.
Okay, all right, I just want to reflect.
Yep. And it's for 126,606.
Just so we're clear, it's invoice number 6669 at the top, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, 126,606. Were you the campaign treasurer for any of those candidates listed there that you recall?
And Alan Freeman.
Okay. So, okay. Let's flip back to, well, I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to flip back. So in Mr. Fry's exhibit L in his notebook, I want you to flip back to the 3rd page. Okay. By the way, were you specifically familiar with that invoice?
Not that I recall, but I probably, since it's to HRCC.
Okay. Are those candidates that you were treasurer for? So if you're on the right,
Wait for you,
if you're on the right.
just gotta let her answer the question first.
6668.
As I testified, I am the campaign treasurer for Jason Stevens, and I believe he's HD 93, and Mark Frazier,
Okay, and you don't recall the other 2.
Mark Crandell.
Okay. And you think it's likely that you saw or received this invoice because of its HRCC?
Yes.
And what does it say under the invoice block to the upper right?
Pay 22420 to income.
Okay. When you saw in the filing that you made on April 15, 2021 into the Secretary of State and looked at these invoices and you saw this invoice, number 6669 for $124,000, did jog your memory that this was very similar to what was going on in HRCC races, but there's a different bill too?
No, I didn't think of that, but I would like to point out that pay 22420 to income would not have been part of the invoice when I saw it.
I agree. If I made an assumption that it was, okay, I didn't mean to, okay? But this invoice, the one in, I guess it's his I or my 19, that's for 126, that's one invoice number later than the one that Mr. Bryan put it in his exhibits. These are candidates that, I'm sorry, which of these candidates are you treasurer for?
Just Freeman on.
Well, we're looking at the Freeman one.
6669.
6669, okay.
Only Freeman.
But when you went to these invoices and you were filing something in the Secretary of State database, did it cross your mind that this looks like the same exact kind of invoices I see on the candidates, the other candidates, coming from the HRCC?
No, not really. I mean, it doesn't, no. I mean, I'm familiar with strategic media placement. I pay
Okay.
hundreds of bills.
If you go back, it's probably the 2nd page, but right after the letter part. Did you review that summary before filing to the Secretary of State?
I see it and I looked at it, but it is not.
Did you attempt to contact anybody at Strategic Media Placement to ask them about these invoices?
These invoices are in constant contact.
Well, but when you're filing something on behalf of the Alan Freeman campaign, and the invoices are in a similar format to ones you're getting from other, and they're coming through QuickBooks the same way, did you make any attempt to go to Strategy and Media to ask whether this was about any of these invoices?
I would object to the question. It fails to have the foundation. She never received these invoices.
She
Unless she shows it until her counsel received them a couple days before the event.
She's the campaign treasurer, and she filed the invoices when she filed on April 15, 2021. So she saw them definitely as of April 15, 2021. So at that point in time, if never before that, once we got to April 15, 2021, did you, I guess your testimony is that you didn't do anything to contact Strategy and Media or anybody about these prior to filing this with the Secretary of State?
You mean March 25th? This is what, is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about, so in the, what they filed with the Secretary of State, had a
You
letter,
need to identify it by exhibit number.
I keep saying 19 or I, page 2. 19 or I, page 2.
Is page 2 the letter or the summary
The summary.
invoices? Okay.
So what you filed included a summary of invoices. Okay, did you make any attempt to get this to Strategy and Media or anybody about that summary?
No, I did not contact Strategic Media Placement about their invoices to constant contact.
If you look up in the corner of that, can you see the date of when that summary was printed at least?
All I can see is 25/21.
So here's the summary.
My date's cut off as well.
Okay, so my version has the whole document, and this is the version that came from the Secretary of State's office.
Can you have her read the date so we can know what it is?
So if you look in my exhibits, it should be in there unless I got copy messed up. But my printouts have it in there, which I'm glad to show people. Can you read the date?
March 25th, 2021.
Okay, so this was done in March of 2021. So obviously somebody went to, well, I believe this was part of discovery from Strategy and Media.
And by the way, that is in Exhibit I, but it's just not in the same place.
It's not in what?
It's not in the same order in which Exhibit 19 has the date. But this piece of paper is in Exhibit I, so it's both, in both are.
Yeah, we just couldn't, on yours, exhibit I, we couldn't see the dates.
Oh, I see, because there's a hole in there.
Yep.
3.5.
That was the problem.
Okay, so I just wanted to, okay. I had like 2 other questions. that I want to get, Mr. Bry asked you if you don't know the source of a contribution, that you can't report it, or it's something to that effect, and you said yes. So I'm going to ask that question again. If you receive a contribution and you don't know who gave you the contribution, do you then not need to report it?
Well, if I receive a contribution, I would know who gave it to me.
What if you just received an envelope with $100 in it that said, for the Alan Freeman campaign with no other information?
You are allowed to accept an anonymous contribution, but you have to report it as such.
Okay, so when a contribution comes in and you don't know who it came from, you can't ascertain who it came from, what are you legally required to do?
Well, you're supposed to try to find out where it came from. Like sometimes at a fundraiser, people would just leave a $20 on the table, perhaps.
Okay, did you ever on these ask anybody? Either back in April of 2020 or in April 15th of 2021 or anywhere in between, did you ever ask Alan Freeman, did we actually run a bunch of TV ads?
No, I never did, and I never saw any of Alan Freeman's TV
Okay,
ads.
but you didn't ask,
No.
was my question. Did you ask Megan Fitzmartin whether there were a bunch of TV ads run?
No.
Did you go online to check? We already said you're not familiar with the FCC database that reports all that stuff legally. But did you go online to, Alan Freeman's website or anything like that to see if there was any evidence that we had run a media campaign?
No.
Why not?
I did not consider that as part of my reporting.
But aren't you obligated to provide a complete and accurate report,
Yes,
including in kinds?
yes.
So wouldn't reasonable diligence be that you would follow up on things when Strategy and Media is producing summaries and invoices that they say are for Alan Freeman?
I did not follow up with that. I did not, I mean, I believe that they were not authorized, like Alan explained here, and they would be disputed if this were actually invoices. Because nothing was presented to us as a committee for me to pay.
Did you ask Alan if he had appeared in TV commercials or in radio ads?
No.
Why not?
I would not, I don't participate in the running of the campaign, I just do the reporting of the campaign. So I don't, again, I did not see any ads for Alan Freeman, I did not,
Are you a CPA?
no.
Okay. Okay. Is that the way you handle other campaigns? If you receive, invoices or something like that and just ignore some of them or do you ask questions, see the candidate?
I would object to the form of the question, it's sort of ambiguous.
Sustained.
Is it normal practice when you receive questionable invoices to not have any discussion with the candidate?
There was nothing normal practice about that invoice, that was unusual.
I didn't ask about that invoice. I asked, was it normal practice if you received an invoice that you had not received authorization for, what have you, to not talk to the candidate about it?
I would object to interrupting the witness before she completes her answer.
She can go ahead and answer.
When I receive an invoice directly, if the candidate has also received it, I wait for their guidance to pay the invoice. If it's paid in the mail,
Did you make any attempt to talk to Jeff Longstrip about the invoice?
Again, I would object to cutting off the witness while she's in the middle of answering the question.
I thought she was finished. Were you
She
finished or did you
said-
have more?
She had a beginning of a sentence, I think just a word, and then he.
Well, let me ask then also.
Wait, Mr. Hicks, let her, if she didn't finish, let's ask her if she's finished. Were you finished with your answer? And if not, tell us that.
I was not finished,
Please finish
but
your.
now I don't really recall what I was going to say. Ask me another question.
Well, another thing I'd like to ask is, just stick to the question I asked, as best as possible.
And let her finish her answer as best as you can.
So,
One question at a time,
okay.
best as you can.
Were you aware that Megan Fitzmartin and Anna Lippincott were providing services to the Alan Freeman campaign?
Yes,
Did you ever ask them for an amount that should be shown on an in-kind report for the services they were providing?
not specifically Alan Freeman, but I asked Anna Lippincott, I worked with Anna Lippincott to get in-kind contributions that HRCC was.
I'm asking, stick to my question.
Please have him not, I object to him cutting off the witness.
You've done it repeatedly, Mr. Hicks. You need to let her finish.
And I agree, but I would like you to stick to the question I asked, as best you can. Okay, when I ask a question. Did you ever get any information or ask for any information from Anna Lippincott or Megan Fitzmartin specific to showing them as an in-kind contribution on Alan Freeman's report?
Showing, what do you mean by that?
Anna Lippincott and Megan Fitzmartin for the services they were rendering.
No,
Why not?
I would never ask for a specific in-kind. I asked for them to provide all the in-kinds that HRCC had made to all of my clients.
Okay. Were you aware of Luke Householder working with Alan Freeman?
No,
Were you aware of RJ Mancini working with Alan Freeman?
I recognize the name, but I could just speak from our previous meeting here, but I don't recall working directly with them.
Okay. Do you recall any notable in-kind reported by Alan Freeman?
I don't recall.
Okay. I don't think I had any other questions.
Yes.
take a look at Exhibit 19 and Exhibit 5, whichever one is easy for you to compare. For the April 15th, 2021 finding. I note that the invoices that are attached are all dated in February, March of 2020. Am I right about that? The invoices from Strategic to Constant.
Yes,
At any time in 2020, have you ever seen any of these invoices?
no,
Did you see them at any time prior to a few days before April 15th?
no,
I noted that you pointed out a document that's dated March 25, 21. You know who prepared that document?
no.
Does it look like a QuickBooks or some other,
It looks like a QuickBooks report.
do you know whether or not Strategic Media Placement uses QuickBooks?
I don't know.
In any event, you didn't see this on March 2020, did you?
No.
And as of April of 2021, was there any ability to find out from Constant Contact what its records say?
I don't believe so at that time, no.
Because at that point, it had been months after all the records had deceased in July of 2020.
I believe that's correct.
Is that one of the reasons why you didn't follow up with Constant Contact to ask for details about these invoices?
I think that's reasonable to say, yes.
In 2020, after the primary election that Mr. Freeman lost, was the focus on, not just your focus, but you know whether or not the focus of Jeff Longstead and Anna Lippincott and Megan Fitzmartin was on the successful candidates rather than unsuccessful?
I don't really know what their focus is on, but that would be normal procedure.
Would it be normal for them to focus more on raising and spending money for campaigns that are still alive rather than those that are no longer alive?
Yes,
And is it common or uncommon for people to sort out the finances of unsuccessful candidates with invoices that haven't been sent after the live races have been completed?
yes.
You were sitting here when you heard the testimony of Stephen Fairway stating that Anna Lippincott had said that at least one of the plans might have been to raise money in Alan Freeman's campaign and pay off whatever they owed that way.
Yes, I heard that.
Did you know whether or not, was that ever communicated to you?
No,
Do you know whether or not it was ever communicated to Alan Freeman?
not that I don't know that.
Have you ever heard about that plan from anybody until you were sitting here today here at Steve Fairway talking about it?
Not that I recall.
If towards October or November 2021, somebody had decided, okay, here's what we claim is a debt, here's what we claim is an invoice, here's what's going to be in-kinded, you could properly report it if you got that information
You mean in 2020?
in 2020.
Yes.
But you never got that information.
No,
And as far as you know, by the time that information would normally be gotten to you, nobody was going to get that information because all the records had been seized.
right.
Does anybody in the commission have questions?
Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions. Do you consider yourself a professional treasurer?
Well, I do get paid for it, so yes.
Okay. And you've got more than 20 years experience, correct?
Yes.
You indicated that you did not see authenticity of the invoices and the invoice in particular of that $290,000 plus. Is that accurate?
Correct, other than pushing back to Anna when I originally received that email. So that would have been my only investigation.
And you didn't click on it to see the backup information of what that $290,000 was for, correct?
Correct. Not
And is this
call.
usual?
No, normally I would have opened it, if there was a PDF attached to it, I would have opened it. You know, if I got an invoice that was $6,000 or $543, $290,000 was so unusual that I did not pursue it beyond that.
It seems a little odd to me, you know, that you would have a $290,000 plus. It's unusual, just as you said. But that would make me even more curious. What is this for and why? So you didn't ask yourself why and what is it for?
No, and I guess I would like to expand a little and say in that context of, to get something like that at that time of year when things are fast and furious, I'm trying to move things through. So when I get something when I got that and replied to her and she just kind of waved me off, I moved on. I can't, I'm just trying to express how busy that primary period can be. And so that's the main explanation.
Your duty as a treasurer is to complete and file all campaign finance reports pre and post election for both winning candidates and those that have lost, correct?
Absolutely.
And for this campaign, the email from Constant Content for that $290,000 came in April 1st. I didn't recall seeing on exhibit, I think it's Mr. Freeman's exhibit I, the report that was filed with the Secretary of State, Committee to Elect Freeman, the document that you went through and said what you knew personally, etc. I didn't see a date on that. Do you recall what date that was?
It was April, I believe April 15th is when we put that up.
Okay, so then you did receive the invoice from Constant Contact on April 1st, so prior to submitting this.
This was filed in 2021.
Okay.
The invoice is 2020.
Okay. That's all I have. Sure.
I have a couple questions. You were the treasurer of the Allen Committee to Elect Allen Freeman, correct?
Yes.
If you look at the Ohio Secretary of State campaign finance disclosure forms, and I'm sure you've seen this before, is it your position that this represents the total expenditure for the Allen Freeman campaign, 2020 campaign?
Well, as I knew it at the time, yes, it was. I was not aware that there was any additional this media spending or any of that. So yes, at the time, that absolutely to the penny balances to the campaign account.
So we added it up and it's 17,000 and change. And certainly that doesn't seem like much money for our campaign. Would you agree?
They're all different.
Now, let me ask you this, as the treasurer, have you ever paid an invoice to Constant Content for the Allen Freeman campaign, the 2020 campaign? Have you ever cut a check to Constant Content for any of the work they obviously did?
I don't know specifically. If I did, it would be on that report.
Well, it's not.
Okay, then I would say I haven't.
Do you think that's unusual?
No, because the only evidence I would have they did anything is that invoice she sent, which, the next step could be for her, and I am speculating here.
We don't want you to speculate. Just testify to what you know if you want.
What I know is that it is entirely possible that that type of an invoice would have been paid by HRCC, and then they would have in-kinded the Allen Freeman Committee, or it could have been paid by ORP, although now, after sitting here in his testimony, I know he was not endorsed by them, but I did not know that at the time. And then that would be in-kinded from ORP to the Freeman Committee, so I would not consider that completely unusual that I didn't pay them, even though they had been presented with an invoice.
Okay, that's all I have.
It's my understanding that it's Mr. Freeman's responsibility to make sure that these are, the information is to you, so you can appropriately record, correct?
Yes.
Now, I struggle with your testimony in that you say, I got this $290,000 invoice, and it was shocking, it was unbelievable, absolutely stood out, and yet you didn't bother to click on to see what was inside the content that made up the $290,000. Are you testifying here today that you didn't look at it at any point in time?
I can't say that 100%, no, I can't say that.
And I guess the next step for me is you've gotten a $290,000 invoice, and the only thing to document that you're not going to pay it is that you had a conversation, they said just ignore it. Is that right?
That's true, and I was never presented with the bill ever again. There
And
was
there
never any follow-up or collection or representing of it.
But you didn't send an email to Anna, or you didn't send one to Mr. Freeman saying, hey, they said go ahead and ignore it, this isn't right, I've looked at it, or I haven't looked at it, nothing like that, correct?
I seem to recall that Anna, I did email me back, but I don't,
She didn't email back saying ignore it, did she?
I believe she did.
And do we have that?
It's in, there's something that says that she.
We have
I
a
don't
statement, exhibit
recall.
I and exhibit 19, do not have it.
Okay.
I didn't think I'd seen it.
I thought that there was actual communication.
So you've got an invoice which you classify, especially in a house race, that is shocking, unbelievable, and yet you never have a conversation with the actual candidate that you're the treasurer for. Is that true?
Not that I recall. So.
Well, I would think if you're talking about something that's as shocking, unbelievable as this, that at some point in time, you'd have a conversation going, this is ridiculous, we need to figure this out, something along those lines, correct?
I understand what you're saying.
But that never took place.
Not that I recall.
Did you ever reach out to Anna to say, hey, should this be an in-kind contribution? Can we get something so we can properly report this?
I don't recall doing that, no.
I don't think I've got any further questions.
No question. So the 4 constant content invoices that were sent on 3/25/21 that were in 19 and on, they equal 137,982 in line which we have discussed. So were these ever paid by anybody? And if they were paid for by whom?
I don't know.
So then they've never sent them back to saying these are unpaid, we need to get this taken care of, this, you know.
They were never sent to her, so they could be sent back to her.
They're from, I believe they're from Strategy Group 2 constant funds.
Yeah. So you never received these at all?
So, I'm sorry, whose QuickBooks file is that? Ledger?
This was the strategy media placement, and they were sent, it was invoices for constant content. So.
And I believe Mr. Hicks previously stated he got that was from the subpoena to strategic media placement.
If I'm allowed.
You're learning. Does anybody else on the commission have questions for this witness? Mr. Richter, do you have anything?
Nope.
Mr. Hicks, go ahead. You have a question for us?
I'm going to put in front of you, because I'm learning. I'm gonna put in front of you. This is exhibit 13 in my exhibits. Exhibit 13. And then I've also referred to exhibit 19 or exhibit I. So exhibit 13 is what Strategy and Media provided as part of this process is their discovery. If you look at the very front page, the page that has the totals on it, on exhibit 13, what's the date at the top of that page?
March 25th, 2021.
Now, if you look at exhibit 19 or Mr. Bry's exhibit I, what's the date at the top of that page? Of the filing that you put into the Secretary of State.
one you just showed me, March 25th.
It is. Okay. So those two, the documents that you filed with the Secretary of State were from the discovery from Strategy and Media. So at the time that you were told to file the documents with the Secretary of State, at that time, did you feel like going back and clicking on the email and seeing what came up?
Objection as to what you felt.
At that time, when you're being asked to file something with the Secretary of State, did you then go back to the email and click on it to see what actually came up when you clicked on the email?
No.
Why not?
Well, I guess.
When you're talking, I'm sorry, when you're talking about the email, you're talking about Exhibit W?
No, so
Or
yes,
no?
yes.
Yes.
So Exhibit W from April 1st. So just to clarify, you're being, make sure I'm asking a question. You're being asked to file something in the Secretary of State's database, making representations about a $290,000 invoice, including invoices and documents that are not from that invoice, but from a separate event. At that time, did you go back and click on the original email to see what came up, or if anything came up?
Ask and answer the judge.
I just want to make sure it's clear to the commissioner. Why didn't you?
We've had so much testimony on this, I feel like
Okay.
ask and answer at this point.
Okay, that's all I have.
Will this witness be excused?
I have none.
Okay, keep it short.
It's gonna be a very nice word to do that.
No, we're not stopping. I know. I'm letting Mr. President, you want to stop at 3:15, because we need to gather ourselves as to what the next proceeding date and how we're going to handle things before the commissioner